Chapter 385. Big sister looks so beautiful when she's eating. Her light purple eyes are so beautiful. Amy sat behind the counter with her chin resting on her hand as she watched Gloria eat with amazement written all over her face. After quietly finishing her breakfast, Gloria paid the driver and got up to leave. When she reached the entrance of the restaurant, she turned back to look at the kitchen and saw Meg's serious face cooking in the kitchen. Her face blushed inexplicably as she pushed open the door and quickly walked out. She ignored the shocked expression on the driver's face and directly said, "Go to the suede textiles shop." "Yes. Yes, young mistress," the driver hurriedly replied before driving the carriage away. "The new boss is coming today. Everyone, be alert. Don't leave a bad impression on the first day." In the suede textiles shop, the store manager had a serious expression on her face as she lectured the 5 or 6 employees in the shop. She tidied up her clothes and walked toward the entrance of the shop while looking around nervously. "What kind of person do you think the new boss is going to be? I heard last time that our shop was going to be closed, but the president insisted on keeping it open. Otherwise, all of us would have lost our jobs," one of the employees whispered. "I heard that the young mistress of the first young master's family is coming this time. Apparently, she has been designated by the president as a candidate to inherit family Moreton. She has the same status as the second young master," another employee chimed in. "She's that powerful. Doesn't that mean that she could become the leader of family Moreton in the future? As long as we serve her well, we might be able to get promoted in the future, right?" a skinny employee said with anticipation in her eyes. If she really had that kind of ability, then she wouldn't have been sent to the suede textiles shop to be the boss. A slightly chubby employee pursed her lips and said with disdain, "How can she compete with the second young master here? Also, I heard that the young mistress of the first young master's family has been wearing a veil since she was a child and doesn't dare to show her true face to others. If you ask me, I'm sure she's very ugly or has something on her face that can't be seen. How could someone like that become the successor to family Moreton?" "Really?" All the shop assistants were shocked when they heard this. They looked curiously at the slightly plump shop assistant, wanting to hear some gossip about the new boss from her mouth. After all, such a big family was very far away from them. "Why would I lie to you? I heard this from one of my sisters at the Moreton Manor. She said that this young lady wears a veil when she's at home, and no one has ever seen what she looks like. She doesn't even take it off when she's eating. How ugly must she be to have to cover her face like that? Is she worried that people won't be able to eat if they look at her?" The slightly plump employee continued with a smug look on her face. "Is this place not open for business yet?" At this moment, a gentle voice interrupted everyone's conversation. The shop assistants looked up, and their eyes lit up. A young girl in a pink dress was standing in the shop. She had a noble pink dress, an elegant temperament, and a stunning appearance. The shop assistants couldn't take their eyes off her. "We are already open for business. What kind of fabric would you like to choose? You're so beautiful, you're like a goddess who has descended from the heavens." The slightly plump employee hurriedly approached her with a fawning smile on her face. "I'm not here to choose fabric." Gloria's expression was slightly cold as she shook her head at the slightly plump employee. "Then who are you?" The slightly plump employee looked at Gloria with a perplexed expression. The other shop assistants also wore similar expressions. The suede textile shop's business had been very poor in the past few years, and they couldn't sell more than a few meters of fabric in a day. That money wasn't even enough to cover their salaries. In any case, with the president's protection, the shop would continue to operate regardless of how bad the business was, so there was no risk of them losing their jobs. It was exactly because of this that the shop assistants had always been very lax in their service. Most customers didn't care what they wanted to buy, and they didn't care. It was only when they encountered customers who were obviously very wealthy and would buy a lot of fabric in one go that they would treat them well. This young girl with an extraordinary temperament was clearly one of those customers, but she was telling them that she wasn't here to buy fabric. "I'm the young mistress of the Moreton family, Gloria Moreton. She's so ugly that you're worried others won't be able to eat," Gloria said calmly as she looked at the slightly plump employee. How is that possible?" The slightly plump employee's expression changed drastically as she saw Gloria stumble back a few steps. Her legs gave out from under her, and she fell to the ground. Her hand that was holding onto the shelf toppled over, and all of the fabric on the shelf fell onto her head. A large red bump immediately appeared on her forehead. "Boss! Boss!" The shop assistants were also panicking. They were talking behind their boss back, and even family Moreton. This wasn't a small matter, and it was enough to cause all of them to lose their jobs. Young mistress, you're here. I'm the manager of Suede Textile Shop, Jean. I didn't expect you to arrive so early." The manager who was standing at the door hurriedly ran in when she heard the commotion. She couldn't hide her surprise when she saw Gloria. She had purposely asked around yesterday, so she had been paying attention to the woman in the gauze hat. She didn't expect Gloria to have already arrived. She had also heard the discussion of the shop assistants. She had heard a lot of these words yesterday. Moreover, she had always been in charge of this shop. Now that a new boss had suddenly appeared out of nowhere, she felt a little uncomfortable. Therefore, she deliberately ignored the gossip of the shop assistants. Perhaps the young lady would leave on her own in a few days. However, it was a different story if Gloria were to hear those words. Furthermore, this was only the first day that Gloria was bad-mouthing her in front of her boss, and as the store manager, she didn't stop them. Cold sweat was already pouring down Jean's forehead as she lowered her head, trying to think of a way to resolve the situation. Gloria only looked at Jean and the shop assistants calmly. She didn't say anything, but her clenched fists showed that she didn't care. It was more like she was accumulating anger. "Young mistress, boss, I was just talking nonsense. I shouldn't have said those things. I know I was wrong. Please don't fire me." The slightly plump employee slapped her own mouth and sat on the ground, crying bitterly. Family Moreton's rules state that all employees are not allowed to talk about family members behind their backs. Once discovered, they will be fired. Gloria was unmoved. She looked at the slightly plump employee and said coldly, "So, you're fired." Gloria looked like she was struck by lightning. She looked at Gloria as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. All of the employees were a little flustered, and didn't dare to look at Gloria with their heads bowed. This young woman was as beautiful as a goddess, yet she was so decisive and merciless. She had only just arrived at the shop, but she had already fired Gloria. Would all of them, who had participated in the discussion just then, be fired as well? "Hello, Miss Gloria." Right at this moment, a voice sounded from outside the door, and Mars strode in slowly in a long black trench coat. He took off his hat, and extended a salute toward Gloria. A hint of surprise flashed through his eyes, but he didn't show any signs of unease on his face. "Mars? Why are you here?" Gloria looked at Mars with surprise. She had heard about Cyril and Mars being punished. That day in the Aden Chamber of Commerce building, Mars didn't sell her out. She also remembered that when she was young, this uncle seemed to have a good relationship with her father. "The president asked me to leave the Aden Chamber of Commerce. I can choose any store in Family Moreton. I heard that young mistress is here, so I applied to come here. The higher-ups have already agreed." Mars nodded slightly. Chapter 386. Young mistress, I've worked at the suede textile shop for over 10 years, and I know everything here like the back of my hand. I'm sure that I can help you make the suede textiles shop prosper again, so please give me another chance. The store manager's expression changed as she pleaded in an earnest manner. Seeing as you've worked here for over 10 years without making any progress, there's no point in keeping you here. Gloria shook her head as she looked at the store manager and said, "Besides, I'm not going to keep a store manager who can't even keep the employees in line. I'll get them to assign you a new job, so you can pack up and leave now." The store manager's mouth gaped open slightly at the sight of Gloria, but she didn't say anything in the end. Instead, she bowed to Gloria before making her way to the lounge to pack her things. All the employees were speechless when they saw this scene. It was one thing for Gloria to be fired, but even the store manager was expelled at the same time. This new boss was simply terrifying. It didn't match her beautiful and charming appearance at all, and it wasn't the legendary image of a woman who didn't dare to show her face. Compared to the young master, young mistress seems to be more suited for this job. Removing her veil is like removing her shackles. Perhaps this is what it means to be a natural talent. She's even more like the president when it comes to rules and regulations. Mars appraised Gloria with a hint of approval in his eyes, and he clenched his fists as a determined look appeared in his eyes. Looks like all I have to do is stand by young mistress's side like my father did for the president. I have to watch her ascend to that position and ensure that the Moreton Manor continues to prosper, at least for as long as I can see. Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Gloria Moreton, your new boss. Gloria turned to the employees with a faint smile on her face before pointing at Mars. This is Mr. Mars, the former Secretary General of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. He will be the new store manager of the suede textiles shop. All of the employees drew a sharp breath at the sight of Mars. They were already quite surprised that their new boss had such a lofty status, but who would have thought that the new store manager would be just as astonished? The secretary of the president was the most trusted person in the entire Aden Chamber of Commerce, so why would she be the store manager of a small textile shop? Thinking back to what Gloria had said, everyone suddenly realized something. Gloria most likely hadn't come here because she had been abandoned by the president. Instead, she was being held in high regard by the president. Even though the blue suede textile shop was currently in an awkward situation, the Moreton family had relied on this textile shop to build up its current fortune. The store manager faltered in the process of packing up her things, and a dejected expression appeared on her face. She was filled with boundless remorse for her foolish actions in the morning. Perhaps she had missed the only opportunity in her life to become a high-ranking official of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Gloria didn't know how she had gotten up from the ground, but she was able to pick up her things and leave the shop that she had worked in for 8 years. The only thing she knew was that if she were to be fired by family Moreton, the shops affiliated with the Aden Chamber of Commerce would generally refuse to accept her. As such, her dream of finding a decent and comfortable job in Chaos City would be completely dashed. Gloria looked at all of the employees with a serious expression, and announced, "I have an announcement to make today. Before I came here, the president gave me an ultimatum. He only gave the suede textiles shop 1 month to turn a profit. If the suede textiles shop can't turn a profit within a month, then this shop that has been operating for 57 years in the Aden Square will be closed, and all of its employees, including me, will be fired." All of the employees' expressions changed upon hearing this, and they all looked at one another with panicked expressions, but no one dared to say anything. They were well aware of the situation of the suede textiles shop. There had been a huge backlog of fabrics in the shop for many years, and just the storage and maintenance of those fabrics required a lot of manpower and expenditure. It was simply impossible for the shop to turn a profit within a month. 1 month. Young mistress. Isn't that a little too short? the petite employee asked in a quiet voice, not daring to look up at Gloria. Gloria shook her head, and said, "If something can't be changed within a month, then it can't be changed within 3 months. This is just like the ultimatum that was given to you 3 years ago. However, this time, it's the president's decision. Yes, young mistress, we will do our best to turn the store's losses into profits within the next month." Mars stepped forward and stood in front of all of the employees with a smile on his face. All of the employees looked on at Mars's departing figure, and they gradually calmed down. This was the president's most trusted man, and he was able to do as he pleased in the Aden Chamber of Commerce. If he said that he could do it, then it definitely wouldn't be an issue. "All right, Mr. Mars, I'm sure you'll be able to do it." Gloria also looked at Mars with a smile on her face. Following the conclusion of the morning opening hours, Meg was in a good mood as he carried a lounge chair to the entrance of the restaurant to bask in the sun. He then turned around to look at Yabamiya and Sally, who were in high spirits as they danced to the Elysium Jodo. During this period of practice, the extremely talented Sally had already mastered the essence of this dance to perfection, and her every movement was filled with liveliness and seduction. In contrast, Yabamiya, who was slightly less talented, had the advantage of more practice, so she had also mastered the technique of this dance very well. She was dancing quite well, and it looked as if she was enjoying herself. Life sure is enjoyable. The Elysium Jodo danced by elves and half-dragon humans can only be seen in this world. Meg stretched his back and closed his eyes. The autumn sun shone down on his body, and he was in a very good mood. During dinner, Amy turned to Yabamiya and Sally with an expectant look in her eyes, and she asked, "Big Sister Mia, Big Sister Aisha, let's dance, spring is here for the kids tomorrow. Can the 3 of us dance together?" "Ha! Yabamiya and Sally were both surprised to hear this. "But I've never danced in front of anyone before, and I'm not very good at it, so I feel a little embarrassed." Yabamiya's face was a little flushed, and her expression was also a little nervous. I've never danced in front of anyone before either." Sally nodded in agreement. She had only danced in front of elves in the past, so she wasn't lying. "Don't worry, Big Sister Mia is really good at dancing. The kids will definitely love it. Big Sister Aisha is so beautiful, so the kids will definitely love your dance. If we dance together, we'll be able to dance for the 3 of us." Amy looked at the 2 of them encouragingly before turning to Meg with a pout on her little lips. "Father, don't you think so? All 3 of you dance very well. I'm sure the kids will love it." Meg nodded with a smile at the sight of the adorable little ones. Chapter 387. Under Amy's insistence and recommendation, Yabamiya and Sally finally agreed to dance the Gokuraku Jodo for the children tomorrow at noon. Of course, Meg's encouragement also played a role. As the guests were being welcomed into the restaurant, Amy ran over to Meg with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and asked, "Father, can we invite Teacher Luna to the children's party tomorrow?" "Of course. Let's go invite her together tomorrow." Meg patted Amy's head with a smile. She really couldn't forget Luna. A children's party. "Little boss, can my children, Parmer and Parber, come too?" George asked with a smile as he walked in at that moment. "Uncle Blue Fatty, do you have any adorable little sisters at home?" Amy looked up at George with anticipation in her eyes. "Your Auntie Miranda might have one in her belly, but she's only 7 months pregnant, so she hasn't been born yet. However, we have a super adorable little brother who's only a little over a year old, Angus." "You've never seen him before," George said with a smile. His face was filled with bliss at the mention of children. "Is it really a little sister?" Amy's eyes lit up upon hearing this, and she extended her little hand toward George with a serious expression as she said, "I've sent an invitation to my little sister, and she can bring her brothers to the gathering tomorrow. Father is going to make super delicious desserts, the kind that I've never made before. Alright, I'll tell them that they're only able to attend the party because of Amy. George nodded with a smile before turning to Meg, and said, Mr. Mac, what do you think? This is Amy's party, so she can invite anyone. You're welcome to attend the party tomorrow. Meg nodded with a smile. He had a good impression of George and his two sons. Besides, it was a party, so the more the merrier. Alright, I think the little ones will like it, especially when they get to eat Mr. Mac's delicious food. George nodded with a smile before walking into the restaurant. Little boss, I also want to attend the party. Can you invite me too? Harrison followed him in, and looked at Amy with anticipation in his eyes. No, Uncle Gray Fatty, don't you know how old you are? It's a children's party tomorrow. Besides, you don't want to attend the party at all. You just want to eat Father's new desserts, right? Amy shook her head with a knowing expression. Sigh, I feel like I'm only 3.5 years old. Harrison sighed. He did not expect his motive to be seen through so easily. As he walked in, he thought to himself, looks like I have to hurry up and find a wife and have a child. Only then can I bring my child to the gathering openly. Sir, the restaurant is closed for the day. If you'd like to have a meal, please come back earlier tomorrow. At 9 p.m., Meg turned over the sign on the door, and was about to close the door when he saw a man in a long trench coat standing at the door. Hello, Mr. Meg. I'm Dykes, from the City Lord's Castle. We met once at the entrance of Chaos School. Perhaps you've already forgotten about it. The man looked at Meg with a smile, and said, I'm not here for a meal today. I'm here on the City Lord's orders. I have something to discuss with you, Mr. Meg. There were a lot of customers in the restaurant earlier, so I waited outside for a while. Can I come in and talk to you for a while? Sure, please come in. Meg looked at Dykes, and didn't have any recollection of him. However, seeing as he was from the City Lord's castle, and he was here on the City Lord's orders, he naturally couldn't turn him down. After all, the City Lord's castle had done a lot to get the restaurant back on the rankings board today. He opened the door and stepped aside. Mr. Meg, your restaurant is doing really well. There aren't many restaurants in the Aiden Square that can compare to it, Dykes said with a smile as he walked in. You're too kind. Meg nodded with a smile before following him into the restaurant. Boss? Yabamiya, who had just cleared the table, turned to Dykes with a perplexed look on her face. Mia, Aisha, you can go back for now. Come back tomorrow at noon. This Mr. Dykes has something to say to me, Meg said with a smile. Alright, bye, boss, Yabamiya. Yabamiya nodded, and the two of them left without asking any questions. Father, can we go to bed now? Amy yawned as she looked at Meg with Ugly Duckling in her arms. Ugly Duckling also yawned at the same time. Me, sit here for a while. You can go to bed soon. Meg nodded with a smile. He had no intention of sitting down. Instead, he turned to Dykes, and asked, What can I do for you, City Lord? Dykes took a glance at Amy, but he didn't sit down. Instead, he turned to Meg with a smile, and said, It's not an order, it's just that the City Lord wants to reserve Mr. Meg's restaurant tomorrow. Would you be willing to do that, Mr. Meg? My apologies, but the restaurant is closed tomorrow, so it's closed. Meg shook his head without any hesitation. He wasn't a model worker who would work on a day off. Ding! New mission, add 16 outdoor seats to the restaurant in 3 days. Due to the large number of customers in the restaurant, and the restaurant's level is too low, so it doesn't have the right to expand. Mission reward, 1 set of outdoor seating. Mission failure penalty, 10,000 gold coins fine. Right at this moment, the system's voice sounded. Holy fuck, system, do you have to be so shameless? Another penalty for failure. Also, how are we going to get outdoor seats? Are you trying to scam me? Mag was taken aback by the new mission, and he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Although there were street owners in the Aden Square, they were all small vendors who could be pushed around. He had never seen a shop owner who dared to do business in the Aden Square, so there had to be rules. Meg was naturally willing to increase the number of seats in the restaurant. Furthermore, the outdoor seats could be provided to customers who were prone to exploding from eating delicious food, such as lava demons and Elizabeth. If they ate in the outdoor seats, he wouldn't have to worry about them exploding as much as they wanted. Mr. Mag, please don't be in such a hurry to turn me down. Perhaps you can state your price first. The City Lord's castle definitely won't owe your restaurant a single cent, Dix hurriedly said. He didn't think that Meg would turn down his request with the excuse that it was a day off. The City Lord's castle was going to book the restaurant, and he was the one who had come to negotiate with them. Perhaps the City Lord's castle is a good way to solve this problem. Meg came to his senses, and a thought flashed through his mind as he looked at Dix. However, he then turned to Amy, and shook his head as he said, I'm not worried about the City Lord's castle. What time does the City Lord plan to book the restaurant tomorrow? Noon tomorrow. Dix's eyes lit up. As expected, no one could refuse an olive branch from the City Lord's castle. No. Chapter 388. Dicus, who had thought that the matter was more or less settled, looked at Meg and Amy in confusion. Their voices and tones were very firm, and there was no room for negotiation. Amy, who had been a little sleepy, immediately woke up. She looked at Dicus and shook her head seriously. I want to invite the children to my house at noon tomorrow. I've already agreed with them, so I can't do that. Mr. Meg, this matter concerns the City Lord's castle. Dicus looked at Meg, intending to bypass the little girl and discuss it with Meg directly. I'm sorry, but I've already promised my daughter that I'll host a party for her and the children at noon tomorrow. There won't be any changes to that. Meg shook his head with a smile and interrupted Dicus. He gently placed his hand on Amy's head, and there was no room for negotiation. Dicus looked at Meg in disbelief. He was actually rejecting the City Lord's castle's request to book the entire restaurant for his child's party. Furthermore, this was a restaurant that the City Lord had personally chosen, and it was even reserved in the name of the City Lord. How could he reject it without even thinking? Father, you're so nice. Amy rubbed her head against Meg's hand and stuck her little tongue out at Dicus happily. This boss is really too nice to his daughter. But if I had such a cute daughter, I'd probably spoil her like this too. Dicus looked at Meg, who was smiling but had no intention of negotiating, and thought to himself helplessly. After hesitating for a moment, Dicus' expression became serious, and he said seriously, Mr. Meg, I shouldn't have told you this in advance, but the City Lord has specifically chosen your restaurant, so I hope you can reconsider. The booking of the entire restaurant at noon tomorrow is not the City Lord's personal decision. Instead, he wants to host the first border meeting between the dragons and demons at Mr. Meg's restaurant. I can't disclose too many details, but I'm sure Mr. Meg knows that this will raise the restaurant's reputation and status. The children's party can be held at a later time, or it can be postponed to the evening. This opportunity only comes once, and if you miss it, you won't get another chance. He's booking the entire restaurant for the meeting. Meg raised an eyebrow. Dragon Island and the Demon's territory were very close, and although they were separated by the boundless sea realm, there were still frequent conflicts between the two sides. He didn't need to guess what this meeting was about, but he didn't expect the City Lord to be so crazy and directly choose a restaurant as the location for the meeting. Was he planning to use food to maintain world peace? Meg suddenly felt a little pressured. Father. Amy looked up at Mag with a conflicted expression upon hearing Dicus' words. She seemed to have understood what Dicus was saying. I'm sorry, but I have to keep my promise to my child. This is what I ask of myself as a father, so the party must be held tomorrow at noon. Meg patted Amy's head with a smile. He then turned to the earnest Dicus and said, if you don't mind, perhaps we can postpone the meeting to tonight. However, I have a few requests. If you can print them out, then our restaurant can reserve the entire restaurant for you for one night. 1. The reservation will start at 5 p.m. and end at 9 p.m. at the latest, and the restaurant will be closed at that time. 2. The reservation fee is 3,000 gold coins, which includes double the overtime pay for the employees during the day off, as well as all the food consumed that night. 3. The city lord's castle has to ensure the safety of the restaurant. If the restaurant is damaged during the meal, the city lord's castle will compensate for the damage. Lastly, I have a small request. Because the restaurant has a lot of customers, and there are no plans to expand for the time being, I want to set up a few tables on the right side of the restaurant near the wall. Can the city lord's castle sell or rent this land to the restaurant? Dicus' mouth opened wider and wider, and he looked at Meg as if he were looking at a lunatic. This guy actually wanted the city lord's castle to postpone the meeting between the dragons and demons, and the reason was that his little girl wanted to have a gathering with the children. What kind of arrogance and confidence was this? He was simply a lunatic. Delaying the meeting to the evening was one thing, but if he wanted to reserve the entire restaurant, he had to agree to a few of his conditions first. It was very difficult to reach an agreement on a race meeting, and it was normal for a meeting to last an entire day. However, Meg only gave 4 hours, and he wanted to close the restaurant at the end of the day. Furthermore, the reservation fee was exorbitant, 3,000 gold coins. If he had reserved the entire restaurant in Ducas, this fee could still be negotiated. However, how could the city lord agree to such a high price for a small restaurant like this? Lastly, he added an additional condition, which was to expand the empty space in front of the restaurant into a part of the restaurant. Dicus didn't know how to describe his current feelings. In any case, it was very complicated and difficult to explain. Who gave this restaurant owner the courage to make such a request? These are my conditions. Sir Dicus, you can go back and discuss them with the city lord. If there's nothing else, I'm going to take my daughter to bed. Meg smiled and politely began to send him off. He didn't think there was anything wrong with these conditions. If it weren't for the fact that he had to complete the new mission issued by the system, he wouldn't have bothered to work overtime on weekends. Meg wasn't interested in maintaining world peace at all. Compared to making Amy happy, it wasn't even worth mentioning. Alright, I'll pass on Mr. Meg's exact words to the city lord and let him make the decision. Sorry to disturb you. Dicus nodded and didn't say anything else. He turned and left. Father, you're so good to me. Amy looked up at Meg and pouted. Her eyes were a little red, and her little face was filled with gratitude. Meg bent down and picked up Amy. He looked at the sensible little girl and said with a smile, Father only has one little girl, so of course I have to treat you well. Nothing is more important than you, so don't cry. I like to see Amy smile. You're the most adorable and beautiful. Yes, yes. Amy nodded as a smile reappeared on her face. She laid gently on Meg's shoulder and planted a kiss on his cheek. She then straightened her back and looked at Meg with an earnest expression as she said, I only have one father, so I have to treat Father well in the future. No one is allowed to bully Father. Chapter 389. You want me to postpone the conference because of your daughter's party. What an interesting guy. Michael, who was standing beside the desk, couldn't help but chuckle when he heard Dicus' words. City Lord, I suggest we change the conference venue. That restaurant's decor is quite elegant, but it's a little small, and it's situated in a corner of the Eden Square, so it looks a little shabby. That might displease the representatives of both sides. Furthermore, the owner has no sincerity in working with us, and all of his demands are quite harsh. 3,000 gold coins is enough to book a restaurant in Dukas Restaurant. The service and environment there are far better than that restaurant. We've worked with them before, so it'll be easier for us to get to know them better, Dukas suggested with a serious expression. The conference between the dragons and demons was very important. In his eyes, there was no way that the city lord would postpone the conference just because of Meg, and there was no way that he would book such a small restaurant for 3,000 gold coins. Furthermore, all of his conditions had to be fulfilled. Michael shook his head with a smile, and said, "No, tell them to reschedule the conference to tomorrow night. The conference venue will be at Amy's." Dukas stared at Michael with incredulity in his eyes. He felt as if he had misheard something, and only came to his senses after a while. He then hurriedly said, "But City Lord," Michael cut Dukas off with a smile, and said, "Dukas, I've actually been to this restaurant before. When I got there, the owner was just about to close for the day. I revealed my identity and asked for a spicy grilled fish, but he turned me down with the excuse that his daughter was getting sleepy. He turned me down." Dukas' expression became even more shocked. Who would have thought that someone would turn down the city lord's request for a meal in Chaos City? If this were any other restaurant, the owner would most likely have woken up in his sleep to welcome the city lord. However, the owner of this restaurant had turned him down with the excuse that his daughter was getting sleepy, just like how he had used his daughter's party as an excuse to postpone the conference at the city lord's castle. "That's right, he turned me down." Michael nodded with a sigh, and said, "I don't think there's anything wrong with that excuse. It's what a father should do. That's why I'm not surprised when you said that he refused to book the entire venue because of his daughter's party. You and I can't do such a thing, but he did. He's a good father." Dukas fell silent. He was also a father, but he had to admit that he wouldn't have made the same choice as Meg if he were in the same situation. Perhaps it could be explained by the compromises and choices in life, but as a father, Meg truly made people feel ashamed. "But Castellan, I still don't think this restaurant is suitable for the meeting. Also, 3,000 gold coins for 4 hours is a little over the budget. This meeting might last for a few days, so we have to guarantee the venue and expenses for the next few days," Dukas insisted after a moment of silence. "No. Among all of the restaurants in Chaos City, this restaurant is the most suitable place for the meeting. Its diverse style is in line with Chaos City's philosophy." Michael shook his head as he placed the book in his hand onto the table. He looked at Dukas with a serious expression, and said, "Also, do you think it's too much for a restaurant with a daily turnover of over 10,000 gold coins to book the entire venue on a night off?" "I don't think it's too much at all. Also, both parties have provided 10,000 gold coins in advance for this meeting. If the meeting tomorrow is successful, the rest of the money can be used as daily income for the city lord's castle, and the investment in manpower and resources will be greatly reduced. Once the negotiations between the two sides are successful, Chaos City will be able to reap even more benefits as the mediator. These are all things that you should look at from a long-term perspective. Make a trip to Amy's tomorrow morning. That's settled on delaying the meeting. Agree to all 3 of his conditions, and confirm the venue and time first. Lastly, go to the Eden Square Management Office and ask if it's feasible to rent the empty space in front of the restaurant. If it doesn't affect the entertainment activities of the residents, and the appearance of the Eden Square, then do your best to satisfy his conditions." "Yes, I'll do that right away." Dukas looked into Michael's wise eyes, and even though he still had many questions in his heart, he swallowed them and departed. Michael's foresight was an important reason why Chaos City was able to achieve its current status on the Norland continent. Of course, there was also another reason why Dicus was convinced, and that was Amy's 10,000 gold coins in revenue. That was something that only the top restaurants in the Aden Square could achieve, yet this small restaurant was able to achieve. This indicated that there was definitely something special about this restaurant. Dragons and demons are the most difficult to deal with. If we were to go by our previous methods, it would take at least a month to reach an agreement. Furthermore, there would most likely be a few fights in between, so there's no way to stop them. Furthermore, it's the same group that came this time. I hope they won't fight at Mamie Restaurant tomorrow night. Michael shook his head. He picked up the book on the table again, and put it down after reading a couple of pages. He then got up and walked out of the door as he murmured to himself, I should go and see how Vivian is doing. I really can't compare myself to her father. Meg coaxed Amy to sleep with a bedtime story, and then went to the rooftop to practice his swordsmanship for a while. After that, he took a hot bath before lying down on his bed. The soreness from his sword practice was washed away by the hot water, and he felt as if all of his pores had been opened. Clearly defined muscles could be seen on his arms. They weren't in an exaggerated shape, but one could still feel the strength contained within them. On his flat abdomen, one could also vaguely see the abdominal muscles. It was just that they were usually hidden under the loose chef's uniform, so it couldn't be seen. During this period of sword practice, Meg's physical fitness had improved significantly compared to when he had first recovered to 2.0. Of course, there was still a long way to go before it reached 2.5. Even he wasn't sure just how powerful he was now. In terms of physical fitness alone, he was only slightly more powerful than a normal person. He was still 0.5 away from becoming a first-tier knight. However, with the 13 dark shadow forms that he had perfected, he should be able to defeat a first-tier knight with ease. Perhaps even a second-tier knight. A month ago, Meg was still a cripple who couldn't even hold a kitchen knife. He was already very satisfied with the progress that he had made. Now that he had 45,000 gold coins, he would be able to purchase another strength point from the system in a few days. He could become more powerful just by spending money. That was a great feeling. Chapter 390. System, are you messing with me? Meg was silent for a long while as he browsed through the recipe in his mind with a dark expression. Please don't slander the system. The system is an honest and upright food system, and it never plays tricks, the system replied in a serious voice. Then where's my Haagen-Dazs combo? Meg shrugged. He could only see 2 ice cream cones after flipping them around. His heart ached so much that he couldn't breathe. The Haagen-Dazs combo is also known as the Haagen-Dazs double ball ice cream combo. It includes vanilla, matcha, blueberry, and chocolate flavors, the system replied in a serious manner. WQNMLGB. Meg rolled his eyes. As expected, he had overestimated the system's integrity. The higher his expectations, the greater his disappointment. There was no such thing as a Haagen-Dazs combo. Please continue to work hard, host. There's a very good chance that you'll be able to unlock the Haagen-Dazs combo in your future missions. There's a chance that you'll be able to unlock more recipes like Haagen-Dazs ice cream cake. The system completely ignored Meg's words. I'm not going to believe you. Meg rolled his eyes, but he still carefully digested the recipe in his mind. Thankfully, this ice cream combo looked pretty good, and there were 4 flavors to choose from. He should be able to give his children a nice surprise tomorrow. System, how much does 1 ice cream cost? Meg calmed himself down before asking in his mind. In order to make the best ice cream, the system has prepared the best ingredients for you, and we've carefully selected natural ingredients from all over the Norland continent. The vanilla was grown on the plains to the northwest of the wind forest. The warm air from the wind forest nourishes their growth, and the entire plains are filled with a fragrant aroma all year round. The vanilla with the best fragrance is ground into fine powder with a natural stone mill, and it has a soothing effect after consumption. Matcha was selected from the Westlake Longjing tea that was planted in the hills north of the Twilight Forest. This batch of tea leaves were carefully selected from the seeds of the 8 Westlake Longjing tea trees. The quality of the tea leaves was much better than the 8 Longjing tea trees. 20 days before the tea leaves were harvested, the leaves were steamed and then ground into powder using a natural stone mill. Each tea tree could only produce 100 grams of matcha. Cow milk was produced on Mysore Island in the Staro Sea. The long hours of sunlight allowed the island to have excellent pastures. The cows would listen to classical music for 4 hours every day, strictly controlling the quantity and quality of their milk. The eggs used were. Therefore, the cost of ingredients for a 2-ball ice cream cone is 80 copper coins. The system's voice sounded a little smug. Fuck. System, you use such good tea leaves to make matcha and then use them to make ice cream. Doesn't your conscience hurt? If my old man finds out about this, he'll beat you to death. Meg's eyes widened when he heard the system's words. The system actually used the holy land of all races to grow vegetables and raise cows. The ingredients produced by the system had never disappointed him. Although Meg had never been poor, using such luxurious ingredients to make ice cream still limited his imagination. At the very least, he didn't dare to imagine what would happen if he used the jar of Longjing tea that was hidden in his old man's bookcase to make ice cream. However, after listening to the system's introduction, Meg's mood improved significantly. If he couldn't make the most delicious ice cream with these ingredients, then it would be a complete waste. As such, he couldn't help but look forward to the taste of the ice cream. He wasn't an ice cream lover, and he didn't remember if he had made any comments about Hagata's ice cream. However, since the system said that it existed, then it must be extreme. Although most of the work was done by machines, Meg still felt that things weren't as simple as he thought. Meg reached out and pushed open the door in his mind. A white light flashed, and he found himself in the test field for the god of cookery. After adapting to the environment, he looked around the kitchen again. There was an ice cream cone machine that was about 1 meter tall on a platform in the corner of the kitchen. The silver-gray metal body gave off a very futuristic feeling. There was an egg-shaped spout, and there were 4 different flavors of ice cream. The LCD screen and the instruction manual had already been transmitted to Meg's mind. Although the fully automatic operation method is a little lacking in skill, but I like it. After digesting the instruction manual in his mind for a while, a smile appeared on Meg's face. He turned on the machine for a trial run, then opened the fridge and pulled out all types of ingredients before mixing them together. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye in the test field for the god of cookery. Meg pressed the start button with a serious expression, and the machine began to operate in a soundless manner. A soft ding sounded, and an ice cream cone fell out. Meg caught it in a paper bag, then pressed the spout button for the vanilla ice cream. 2 yellow balls of ice cream fell into the cone one after another, stacking on top of one another. Frosty air wafted through the air, and a faint vanilla aroma wafted through the air. There was even a fine layer of powder on the surface of the ice cream cone. After putting down the vanilla ice cream, Meg proceeded to make the strawberry, blueberry, and chocolate ice creams in the same proficient manner. He carefully set them up on the shelf beside him, and looked at the 4 ice creams. Even though they were exposed to the air, they didn't melt very quickly. They were all very pleasing to the eye, and he asked with a confident expression, "System, this should be enough, right?" Ding! Congratulations, host, you have successfully learned the recipe for the double ball ice cream. At the same time, you have unlocked the required ice cream machine and ingredients. The system's voice sounded. At this level, it's nothing. Meg raised an eyebrow, and a smug smile appeared on his face when he saw that only 3 days had passed. But system, aren't you forgetting something? Meg's smile faded, and he asked in his heart. Host, you have successfully learned the recipe for the double ball ice cream, and you can leave the test field for the god of cookery. If you want to continue using the test field, please pay the rental fee, the system replied in a serious voice. No, that's not it. Meg shook his head. He had already mastered the 13 shadow forms, and his current physical fitness had already reached its limit. Practicing in the test field for the god of cookery couldn't improve his physical fitness, so he had no intention of renting the test field for the god of cookery. What I'm saying is, you didn't mention the requirements for making the ice cream. I'm curious, what did I say about Haagen-Dazs in my past life? Meg asked in a serious manner. Host, are you sure you want to know? The system asked after a brief silence. Tell me. Meg rolled his eyes. Chapter 391. Meg was stunned for a moment before asking, that's all. That's the only comment you made about Haagen-Dazs on Weibo in your past life, the system replied in a serious manner. Then why the fuck did you force me to stay here and make ice cream for 3 days? I didn't make any comments, did I? There's no standard at all. Meg grumbled, feeling like he had been played for a fool. No, there's a lot of information contained in that short sentence of yours. After analyzing the information, the system came to the following conclusion: the word handful is a typo in the context of the host, but in ancient times, it could be regarded as a counterfeit word. Even though half of the human population has such a thing, once it's put on the table or turned into words, it'll make people feel disgusted. If it's used to describe ice cream, due to its shape and the way it's eaten, it'll also carry a certain negative connotation. The word thief literally refers to someone who steals, but in this context, it's used as an adverb with a strong sense of very, and it strongly expresses the dissatisfaction in the host's heart. Hence, the taste and shape of Haagen-Dazs ice cream are vastly different from the perfect ice cream in the host's heart. This is the standard for this ice cream, the system replied in a serious manner. In the end, it asked curiously, but there's something I don't quite understand. What does the fact that the ice cream is too sweet have to do with his mother? You're awesome, system. Meg was filled with awe, and he clapped his hands as he said, if you were to take a reading comprehension test, you'd probably get full marks. Even I didn't think as much as you did back then. You're too kind, host. The Chinese language is vast and profound, and the system has studied it for over half a month, but there are still many things I don't understand. The system then continued, also, you still haven't answered my question. What does this have to do with his mother? Even if the ice cream doesn't taste good, his mother should be innocent, right? Also, according to biological principles, ice cream doesn't have the ability to reproduce, so it doesn't have a mother. Host, you made a logical error in what you said back then. Even if you're referring to the beneficial bacteria in the ice cream, they reproduce too quickly, and it's very troublesome to find their mother. System, I suggest you take a look at A Chinese Odyssey to the West, Meg interrupted the system with furrowed brows. Journey to the West. Isn't that an entertainment film? Entertainment makes people lose their dreams. This system doesn't need entertainment. The system refused and continued, I prefer to read historical and literary works. I can understand humans and the world faster and gain more knowledge. Learning makes me happy. Host, I can recommend some programs to you. China's central TV channel has many good programs, such as National Treasure, A Bite of China, Super Project. I'm not asking you to entertain yourself. I just want to tell you something. If you talk too much, you'll get beaten up. Meg curled his lips. He did not know why the system had suddenly become so long-winded. It was so talkative that he was not used to it. The system fell into silence. After a while, it said coldly, "Host, please mind your words. If you don't pay the rent, you will be automatically expelled from the test field for the god of cookery in 3 minutes. Expel him. I can have a good night's sleep." Meg shrugged nonchalantly. He looked at the 4 ice creams beside him and smiled. Amy should like them, right? With a flash of light, Meg's consciousness returned to his body. He opened his eyes and looked at Amy, who was sleeping soundly. He smiled and closed his eyes again. The next day, Meg woke up naturally. He looked at the alarm clock that pointed to 7:30 a.m. He got out of bed and walked over to the bedside. He leaned over and gently kissed Amy's forehead. The little girl had been attending magic classes for an entire week. It seemed that she was a little tired. Meg went downstairs to prepare breakfast for Amy, and he habitually looked out of the floor-to-ceiling window. He was a little surprised to see a familiar figure walking around outside the restaurant. He opened the door with a smile, and said, "Mr. Dykes, why are you here so early?" "Mr. Meg, I came here on the orders of the city lord. The city lord has agreed to postpone the meeting until tonight, and he has also agreed to all 3 of your conditions. However, regarding the rental of the restaurant, we still have to negotiate with the Aiden Square Management Office. I came here a little early this morning, and they haven't started work yet, so I'll have to get back to you a little later. Also, there's no guarantee that you'll be successful." Dykes cut straight to the chase. "Alright, in that case, I'll make preparations for the meeting tonight. However, I need to know how many people will be attending the meeting so that I can make the necessary preparations." Meg was a little surprised that the city lord had agreed to all of his conditions. After all, this was a high-level meeting between the 2 races. However, he didn't let his surprise show on his face. Instead, he continued in a calm manner, "Also, I'll only provide food that costs up to 3,000 gold coins. If there's any excess, I'll have to ask the city lord's castle to pay for the excess. The price will be set according to the restaurant's menu. There will be a total of 10 people attending this meeting. Mr. Meg, it would be best if you could rearrange the dining tables in the restaurant. If you have any difficulties, the city lord's castle can send someone to help you with the arrangements. As for money, you don't have to worry about that, Mr. Meg. The city lord's castle will definitely not owe you a single copper coin," Dykes said with a smile. "There's no need for that. I also believe in the city lord's castle's sincerity. See you tonight then. I have to go make breakfast for Amy." Meg nodded with a smile. He liked to work with people who were efficient. "You're a really good father." Dykes faltered momentarily before a resigned smile appeared on his face, and he said, "Then I won't disturb you any longer. I also have to bring some green onion pancakes for my son, but he can only eat them at noon." "Alright, see you later." Meg nodded before turning to enter the restaurant. Even though the city lord's castle didn't guarantee that he would be able to rent the empty space in front of the restaurant, it was at least much more reliable than renting it from the Aiden Square Management Office. As for the meeting that night, Meg was actually quite interested in it. All of the people attending the meeting were most likely high-ranking members of the 2 races. Listening to their speeches would also be a good opportunity for him to learn about the current situation of the entire Norland continent. Some things couldn't be bought even with money. In the kitchen, a brand new ice cream machine had already been placed in the corner. Meg made some adjustments, but he wasn't in a hurry to make ice cream. Instead, he made 2 servings of braised chicken and rice. Chapter 392. That's right. Let's rehearse one last time when they get here. Meg nodded with a smile. It seemed that this dance was very important to Amy. After helping Amy change into a purple princess dress and tie her hair into 2 adorable ponytails, Meg pushed the bicycle out after breakfast. He took Amy and the reluctant ugly duckling with him and rode toward Chaos School. The eye-catching bicycle attracted a lot of attention. Many people couldn't understand how such a small bicycle could move forward so steadily. It was as if there was some kind of incredible power pushing the bicycle forward. Meg didn't have any plans to promote bicycles for the time being. Besides, it felt pretty good to be the only bicycle on the streets. It was quite interesting to see so many envious gazes. The bicycle stopped in front of Chaos School. Because it was a rest day, there was almost no one in the school. Occasionally, there would be 1 or 2 teachers going in and out. There were also a few children playing soccer with balls in their hands. I want to go in and find Teacher Luna. Is that okay? Meg stopped the bicycle and smiled at the old man and the orc guarding the gate. He had become quite familiar with the 2 of them during the time he had been taking Amy to and from school. Just a little while will do. We're going to invite Teacher Luna to the party. Please, Amy said coquettishly as she hugged Ugly Duckling in her arms. The old man at the gate looked at Amy with a smile, and nodded as he said, "All right, but you have to come out quickly. The female teacher's dormitory is on the right. Go all the way to the end, but men are not allowed to enter, so you can only wait downstairs." "All right, thank you." Meg nodded, and Amy walked into the school. When they arrived at the female teacher's dormitory, they asked the housekeeper to call Luna down. "Teacher Luna, we're here to invite you to a party at noon today. Do you have time to come?" Amy immediately rushed over at the sight of Luna coming down the stairs. She looked up at her with anticipation in her eyes. A party? A hint of surprise and confusion appeared on Luna's face. She gently stroked Amy's hair and looked at Meg. "Miss Luna, it's like this. I want to hold a small gathering for Amy and her friends this afternoon, and she can decide who to invite." The first person she thought of was Miss Luna. "If you're free this afternoon, perhaps you can come to the restaurant and join the gathering. There won't be many people, and the children will be the main characters." Meg looked at Luna and said with a smile. Luna was wearing a gray cotton dress with a white ribbon draped over her shoulders. He had a good impression of this kind-hearted girl. "If that's the case, that's great. It just so happens that today is a rest day and I have nothing else to do." Luna looked at Amy's expectant gaze and Meg's gentle expression. She hesitated for a moment before nodding with a smile. "Great. Teacher Luna, you have to come on time." Amy was so happy that she almost jumped up and down as she looked at Luna with an earnest expression. I will." Luna nodded with a smile. She looked at Meg and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, Mr. Meg. As long as the children and the guests are happy." Meg smiled and said, "Then we'll take our leave now. Amy still has to go invite a child." "All right, see you at noon, little Amy." Luna smiled as she stroked Amy's hair. She then reached out to rub Ugly Duckling's head, which was completely uninterested in everything because of its motion sickness. The smile on her face became even more radiant. "Goodbye, Teacher Luna." Amy waved her hand before leaving with Meg's large hand in hers. "Mr. Meg really is an interesting person." A smile appeared on Luna's face as she looked at the 2 of them slowly walking away. Only after the 2 of them had disappeared from her sight did she turn and enter the dormitory room. "Father, Jessica will definitely be very happy, right?" Amy asked as she sat on the back seat of the bicycle with an expectant look on her face. "That's right. Jessica will definitely be very happy to be invited by a friend. Furthermore, we've prepared a present for her, haven't we?" Meg said with a smile. He looked at the bag under Ugly Duckling's body in the basket, and discovered that there was a little yellow dress inside. "That's right. Thank you, Father." Jessica will definitely love that dress. She's always wanted a yellow dress. Amy nodded with an elated expression. But do you still remember where Jessica's house is? I'll need you to show me the way later, Meg asked with a smile. I've been there with Jessica twice. There are many houses built from black stones there, and there's a black stone horse in front of Jessica's house. Jessica said that her father made it for her, and she'll look really cool on it, Amy said with a confident expression. That's good. If Amy likes horses, then I can buy you a real one. Of course, a wooden horse is fine too, Meg said with a smile. Really? Amy's eyes immediately lit up. However, after thinking about it carefully for a while, she still shook her head as she said, but a real horse is too big. Ugly Duckling is so stupid that it'll definitely be bullied if we get one, so I think I'd better get a wooden horse. Alright, I'll make a fun wooden horse for Amy when we get back. Meg nodded with a smile. Even though she bullied Ugly Duckling on a daily basis, she still cared for it a lot. The two of them rode on the bicycle along a wide stone street. Meg was feeling very relaxed as he looked at the scenery on the road. There were Western-style buildings constructed from white stones on both sides of the street, and all types of domes and spires, creating a very luxurious sight to behold. The central and southern parts of Chaos City were the most prosperous areas, while the northern part of the city was where the poor and commoners lived. Warwick, please give me a little more time. I'll definitely return all the money to you, please. In front of a single-story house constructed from black stones, a woman who appeared to be in her 30s was looking at a young man in a set of golden robes with a second-tier knight badge on his chest with a pleading expression. There were 6 tall and burly men standing behind him, all of whom were looking at her with sinister expressions. Jessica was shielded behind the woman, and she was glaring at the man who was standing on the back of the black stone horse with hatred in her eyes as she clenched her little fists. Chapter 393. No. That's impossible. There's no way I'll give Jessica to you. Rebecca was a little panicked as she shielded Jessica behind her, and she backed her up against the wall as she looked at Warwick with a determined expression. She had heard many rumors about Warwick during the past few years. Countless women in the mining district had fallen into his hands, and not a single one of them had met a good end. Even little girls were not spared. Not long ago, there was a girl who was less than 12 years old who was pregnant with his child, but he kicked her in the stomach in a drunken stupor, killing both her and her child. That girl had been used by her gambling addict father to repay his debt, but Warwick was still a child. She couldn't imagine what would happen to Jessica if she were to fall into his hands, so she would rather die with Jessica. Warwick's underlings also chuckled as they looked at Rebecca and Jessica in an unbridled manner. A pair of orphans and widows like this were the easiest to bully, especially when they were quite beautiful. If Warwick didn't like them, then perhaps he would just take advantage of them. This was something that had happened many times in the past. There were also some people standing in front of the black bungalows not far away, looking in their direction. However, their expressions were a little numb, and they were completely expressionless. The black gravel path was riddled with potholes. It had rained the day before yesterday, and some of the potholes were still filled with black puddles of water. These puddles of water fused together with the black bungalows around them, making them appear as if they were mining pits. Amy, are you sure it's this alley? Meg turned to Amy, who was sitting on the back seat, and asked. Yes, Father, I'm sure that Jessica's home is in this alley. Amy nodded with a serious expression. All right, let's go take a look. Meg nodded with a smile. He wanted to retort that Amy had said the same thing 3 times before, but she was his little celestial maiden, after all, so he had no choice but to continue onward while carefully avoiding all of the small puddles. He was used to the bustling streets around the Aiden Square, but he still wasn't used to living in the slums. Even in Chaos City, there were still many people living in poverty. That's not up to you to decide. If you can't pay me back, then I'll take your belongings as collateral. I don't want anything in your rundown house except for this little girl. Warwick shook his head as he turned to Jessica with a smile, and said, "Do you know how much you owe me? I'm a good person, but I'm too kind-hearted. After all, I'm a noble second-rank knight. I pity you, so I made such a request to you. Otherwise, even you would be mine. 2 years ago, my husband passed away due to a mining accident. I borrowed 20 gold coins from you to bury him." Rebecca clenched her fists, suppressing her grief and anger. 20 gold coins. 2 years have passed and the interest has accumulated. Now you owe me a total of 500 gold coins, and this is after deducting the small change. Tell me, is your daughter worth this price? Have I been too kind to you? Warwick chuckled coldly. Indeed, Master Warwick is the kindest person in this world. Only Master Warwick would be so generous. If it were me, I'd take both mother and daughter. All of Warwick's underlings chimed in, and their boorish laughter was very jarring. Warwick's smile became even more vibrant, and he seemed to be very pleased with their praise. He turned to Rebecca and waited for her response. How could it be 500 gold coins? Rebecca looked at Warwick with incredulity as she shook her head. That's impossible. I only borrowed 20 gold coins from you. How could it be 500 gold coins? You can't say things like that. I'm going to sue you to the City Lord's castle. This is the IOU that you signed back then. It's written in black and white that the interest is half every month. Up until now, it's already more than 500 gold coins. Even if you complain to the City Lord's mansion, it's still my win. When the time comes, the City Lord's mansion will help me force you to pay back the money and make you hand over your daughter to me as repayment. Warwick waved the IOU in his hand with a sinister smile on his face, and all of Warwick's underlings also burst into laughter. Rebecca looked at the IOU in Warwick's hand, and she felt as if the entire sky were collapsing around her. She felt as if her eardrums were about to be torn apart, and she reflexively hid Jessica even further behind her. Jessica looked up at the completely panicked Rebecca, and there was a hint of fear on her little face, but she didn't cry. Instead, she gripped her mother's hand tightly in an attempt to provide her with some warmth and support. Rebecca faltered momentarily before looking down at Jessica. She gripped Jessica's little hand tightly as if she were grasping at straws. She came to her senses, and turned to Warwick as she said, "Master Warwick, please give me a little more time. Governor Woodrow said that my husband's pension will be paid very soon, and it's definitely going to be more than 500 gold coins. I'll be sure to return all of it to you when the time comes. Please let us go, and let Jessica go. She's only a 5-year-old child." "You sure are naive." Warwick shrugged with a smile. He took a couple of steps closer to Rebecca, and whispered into her ear, "Governor Woodrow is my uncle, and he told me in person that the pension for all of the miners who died in the mining accident has already been paid. However, you won't receive any of that. Even if you wait until you die, you'll never receive the money that your husband sacrificed his life for. That money doesn't belong to you lowly black rats in the first place. I'll enjoy your daughter to the fullest. If she can live a few more years, perhaps she can even give birth to a child." How could this be? Rebecca's pupils gradually widened as she stared at Warwick's sinister smile. Her sickly face paled even further, and she felt as if all of the strength in her body had been sucked out of her body. She slowly fell to the ground, and it was as if even her soul had disappeared. "I heard that you went to buy medicine with a dragon coin a few days ago. You have the money to treat your illness, but you don't have the money to pay me back. That's not right. Aside from this little girl, I'll treat the rest of the money as interest." Warwick waved a hand, and two burly men stepped forward to search Rebecca's body. "Don't you dare bully my mother. You're all bad people. If my father were still alive, he'd be able to send you flying with a single punch." Jessica rushed forward from behind and spread open her arms to shield Rebecca. "Get that short-lived bastard to crawl out of his coffin and beat us up." Everyone burst into raucous laughter, and one of the burly men tore off the money pouch hanging from Rebecca's waist. The money pouch was torn apart, and a handful of gold, silver, and copper coins fell to the ground, some of which jumped into a puddle. "Idiot, pick them all up." Warwick's brows furrowed with displeasure, and the burly men hurriedly bent down to pick up the money. "I can't. This isn't my money, someone lent it to me. I have to return it to him." Rebecca struggled to her feet, but Warwick stepped on her shoulder. Warwick pinched Jessica's chin with his other hand, and a sinister smile appeared on his face as he said, "If I say it's mine, then it's mine. From today onward, she belongs to me as well." A gold coin rolled forward, and a burly man with tattoos all over his body followed along behind it. The gold coin crashed into a wheel, and spun on the spot before coming to a stop. An elated expression appeared on the burly man's face as he reached out to pick it up. However, as soon as his hand came into contact with the gold coin, a foot came crashing down like a heavy hammer, stomping his hand into the black gravel. "This is my money." Chapter 394. Who's that? The originally noisy scene instantly quieted down. Everyone turned to look in this direction. A tall and thin young man was pushing a strange two-wheeled cart. One of his feet was stepping on the hand of a burly man, and that hand was directly trampled into the black gravel. The burly man was squealing like a pig on the ground, and the young man had a calm expression on his face, creating a stark contrast. This young man clearly looked like an ordinary person, so how had he been able to render the burly man completely powerless? "It's Amy. And her father." Jessica caught sight of them out of the corner of her eye, and she was ecstatic to see them, but she was quickly struck by a sense of urgency as she thought to herself, "No. They shouldn't be here. This bad guy is definitely going to make things difficult for them. What should I do?" Rebecca was already in despair, and she was prepared to die rather than allow Jessica to fall into Warwick's hands. She didn't recognize the young man, but she immediately recognized Amy, who was sitting on the back seat of the bicycle. She hurriedly yelled, "Don't worry about us. Hurry up and leave. They're all bad people." All of the onlookers in the distance were still looking on with cold expressions, as if nothing could pique their interest. "Who are you?" Warwick removed his foot from Rebecca's body, but his other hand was still holding on to Jessica's face. He appraised Meg with narrowed eyes, and a hint of hostility appeared on his face. The other burly men also made their way toward Meg with hostile expressions, and some of them even drew their sabers. This guy looked a little strange, but he was only one person, and he didn't appear to be very powerful. There were so many of them, so it wouldn't be an issue for them to take care of him. Meg took a glance at Rebecca, who was slumped to the ground, and Jessica, who was being pinched by Warwick's mouth. Neither of them had sustained any obvious injuries, and he heaved an internal sigh of relief. He looked up at Warwick, and his grip on the handlebars of his bicycle tightened as a hint of killing intent appeared in his eyes. This was a scumbag who was trying to rape a widow and her child, a pedophile who was trying to take over a little lowly. A person like him deserved to die. "You bastard. Let go of Jessica. Otherwise, I'll show you what I'm made of. I'm Amy." Amy stood up from her little seat and pointed at Warwick with an enraged expression. "TSK, another one. Looks like I'm in luck today. It's a pity that she's a little too young, but she's going to be amazing in a couple of years." Warwick's eyes immediately lit up as he turned to Amy, and he licked his lips with a smile on his face. Boss, we'll help you catch her. Amy's underlings roared with laughter as they rushed toward Meg as well. Amy, Amy said, Amy, Amy said, Amy, Amy's, Amy, 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 okay, Shammy will cheer for father. You must defeat the bad guys and save Jessica. Amy, 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 father, dad, 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 and dad, Amy, dad. All right. Meg nodded. Then, he lifted his foot that was stepping on the burly man's face. It was as if a sledgehammer had smashed into his face, and his chubby face was completely deformed. The burly man, who weighed over 100 kilograms, was sent flying before crashing heavily into the bodies of Meg's underlings. The sound of bones breaking erupted, and all 5 of them were knocked to the ground at the same time. All of the underlings who had been clamoring to catch Meg and Amy just a moment ago were now unable to stand up. Many of their bones had been broken, and all of them were wailing in agony as they lay on the ground. Wow! Father is so strong! Amy exclaimed as she clapped her little hands together. Ugly Duckling had finally regained some consciousness, but it looked up before falling back down again as if it had lost all interest. Amy's father is so strong. Jessica's eyes widened with concern, and the incredulity in her eyes quickly turned into admiration. So strong. Rebecca looked on as all of the burly men were knocked to the ground by Meg with a single kick, and her concern for Meg and Amy's safety was immediately alleviated. A hint of hope then welled up in her heart, and she looked up at the second-tier knight badge on Warwick's chest, upon which her heart tightened again. Warwick was a powerful second-tier knight, and this was the reason why he was able to do as he pleased in this area. No one could oppose him, and powerful knights wouldn't live in a place like this. In fact, they would rarely even pass by this place. The people standing in front of the black house not far away looked at the wailing underlings on the ground, and their expressions finally changed slightly. They turned to Meg with incredulity in their eyes. This was something that they had never seen before, and a hint of blood began to surge in their chests. Who are you? Warwick released Jessica and gripped the long sword hanging from his waist with one hand. He took a couple of steps forward before turning to Meg with a grim expression for the first time. Even though all of his underlings were ordinary people, the fact that he was able to cripple all of them with a single kick indicated that he was at least a first-tier knight. Even though he was a second-tier knight, he was far more powerful than Meg, but what he was concerned about wasn't Meg's power. Instead, he was concerned about his possible identity. The people who lived here were merely family members of the deceased miners. After losing the pillar of their family, even living was a luxury for them, let alone resisting. In this place, he could do whatever he wanted. He was the king. However, Meg was clearly different. Judging from his attire, it was clear that he didn't belong here. Furthermore, his power indicated that he was most likely not an ordinary person. At the very least, he wouldn't be as easy to bully as these black rats. Scum like you doesn't deserve to know my name. Meg also stopped in his tracks before plucking off a branch from a nearby peach tree. He pointed at Warwick's second-tier knight badge with a mocking expression as he said, "And you don't deserve to wear this badge either. What kind of knight are you? Who do you think you are? How dare you say that I'm not a knight?" Warwick flared up with rage as he drew his long sword. Even though his knighthood had been revoked by the Knight Guild last year, he had never told anyone about this. As such, he was like a mouse whose tail had been stepped on by Meg. His identity as a knight made him feel superior to others. This was also the reason why he always wore his knight badge on his chest every time he went out. This sense of vanity was almost morbid. "I'm here to correct a knight's conduct." Meg's expression was very calm as he looked at Warwick with a cold expression. "Are you challenging me?" Warwick chuckled coldly with a hint of disdain on his face. Chapter 395. Everyone fell completely silent, and even the howls of anguish from the lackeys on the ground gradually died down. All of them were looking at Meg with horror in their eyes. They had never seen anyone who dared to speak to Warwick like that. However, this man had just crippled them with a single kick. Did he really have the power to battle Warwick? He was going to challenge Warwick to a duel with a single peach branch. What kind of confidence and arrogance was this? One had to realize that Warwick was a powerful second-tier knight who could easily subdue them with a single finger. Father is so cool. Amy looked at Meg with glowing eyes as a ball of fire and a ball of ice flames appeared in her hands, ready to be thrown at any moment. Shut up. Warwick glowered at Amy before turning to Meg with a dark expression. He had always been the one to act high and mighty in front of others, but he felt as if he were being looked down upon by Meg. This made him quite displeased, and he said in a cold voice, "You're very arrogant." "Father," he yelled at me. Amy pouted at Meg with a pitiable expression. Flames and ice flames rose up from her hands like two torches. "Be a good girl, Father will make him pay the price for yelling at you," Meg consoled in a gentle voice. If Amy were to unleash a fireball, he would most likely be unable to last even a second. However, on this occasion, he was going to protect Amy with his own power. Meg turned to Warwick with a mocking expression. "You don't even have the courage to challenge me. A knight's challenge can lead to death." A cruel smile appeared on Warwick's face. "That's why you're scared." Meg spoke in a calm voice, as if he were stating a fact. "You're asking to die, brat." Warwick gritted his teeth as he raised his long sword and pointed it at Meg. "I, Warwick, officially challenge you to a duel. Do you dare to accept my challenge? A knight's challenge has never happened in the slums. Can this young man defeat Warwick? He's a second-tier knight. He's extremely powerful. Boss will definitely win. He is the strongest person I have ever seen." Everyone looked at this scene and thought silently. They were a bit nervous. They didn't expect that a debt collection matter would evolve into a knight's duel. Duels were prohibited in Chaos City, and as long as both parties agreed, life and death were up to fate. Even if one died, the Great Temple and the City Lord's castle wouldn't pursue the matter. Now that both sides had become enemies, the final outcome was likely to be the death of one of them. However, would he accept this challenge? Everyone's eyes fell on Meg. Even though he had just sent 5 people flying with a single kick, he was currently holding a thin peach branch in one hand and wearing a loose gray robe. Compared to Warwick, who was wielding a sharp long sword and wearing a set of golden robes, he appeared to be a little feeble and scholarly. Even though he was just standing there, he appeared to be a lot weaker. How could he fight with a peach tree branch? This was the biggest doubt in everyone's heart. At the same time, they also concluded that Meg would definitely refuse this duel. At the very least, he should go home and get a suitable weapon, right? "I accept your challenge." Meg nodded at Warwick with a smile on his face and said, "You're right, duels can lead to deaths. I was going to ask you to go home and get a new weapon, but I've changed my mind." Warwick glared at Meg with a cold expression as he charged toward Meg with his sword raised. "Seeing as you've already accepted my challenge, you can die now. Draw your sword." He was very fast, and he was still accelerating. His power as a second-tier knight was on full display, and he gripped his sharp long sword with both hands as he glowered at Meg with cold killing intent in his eyes. Warwick wanted to kill Meg, and he was only going to unleash a single sword strike. Meg's appearance had severely threatened his authority. Regardless of whether it was in front of his subordinates or in the hearts of the Black Rats, he had to maintain his supreme and irresistible image. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to bully them as he pleased in the future, and that made him very displeased. As such, Meg had to die, and he had to strike fear into the hearts of those Black Rats. Amy's father will definitely be able to defeat this big bad guy. Jessica, who was tightly held in Rebecca's arms, clenched her fists tightly as she thought with a nervous expression. Rebecca had already closed her eyes, not daring to watch what was about to happen. She suddenly regretted involving Meg in this. Jessica had already lost her father, and Amy had lost her mother. If she were to lose her father as well, then it would be far too cruel for her. Is he going to die just like that? All of the spectators in the distance widened their eyes with indignation on their faces, but there was also a hint of anticipation in their eyes. They seemed to have become accustomed to being bullied and having their dignity trampled on, and they even felt that this was a natural thing to do. However, Meg's appearance had given them a glimmer of hope, but it also brought them a sense of discomfort. It was as if a piece of cloth had been torn off their bodies, exposing them to the sun, making them feel as if they really had become black rats that had just crawled out of a coal mine. As such, if Meg were to die, then everything would go back to normal. They could continue to lie on the ground and try their best to survive. Boss is definitely going to win. All of the lackeys endured the pain in their bodies as they looked up at Warwick with anticipation in their eyes. They raised their swords as they charged toward Meg like a demonic demon. That sword strike was going to kill him. In their hearts, Warwick represented invincibility and victory in every battle. There was no way that the man holding the peach tree branch in his hand would be a match for Warwick. Furthermore, how was he going to kill someone with a peach branch? What a joke. What a pitiful man who was about to die. Meg stood still on the spot with a peach branch in his hand. His eyes narrowed slightly as he looked at the oncoming Warwick, and a serious expression appeared on his face. Accepting a challenge from a second-tier knight with his power did indeed appear to be a little arrogant, and it wasn't a wise decision to expose his power in front of others. However, there were some things that had to be resolved in a man's way. For example, a duel. Or, for example, killing someone. How is a peach branch going to kill someone? Buy yourself a good sword in your next life. In just a few steps, Warwick had already reached Meg. A sinister smile appeared on his face as he bared his two black front teeth. He raised his long sword high above his head with both hands before slashing it down toward Meg with devastating force. However, before the long sword had even struck, the smile on Warwick's face froze on his face. He looked down with incredulity to discover that a peach tree branch as thick as a thumb had punctured his knight badge before puncturing his heart. Chapter 396. Warwick's eyes widened as he stared at Meg with incredulity in his eyes. His long sword clattered to the ground, and he fell backward, throwing up two mouthfuls of blood as he stared intently at Meg. Even in death, he was unable to close his eyes. Blood slowly seeped out from his body, staining the black gravel ground and the small puddles. The smell of blood and gore made Meg's brows furrow slightly, and his hands trembled slightly. Killing someone wasn't something that could be done easily. However, Meg didn't regret killing Warwick. Warwick really did deserve to die, and more importantly, he had crossed Meg's bottom line. He was already a dead man when he displayed his greed toward Amy. He was going to tell him as a father that little Lolas were to be spoiled, and that if Warwick had any thoughts that he shouldn't have, then he could go and die. Father is so strong. Amy closed her eyes, but she still clapped her little hands as she yelled. Awesome! The bad guy is dead. Mother, we're saved. Jessica held on to Rebecca's hand with elation. Rebecca opened her eyes in shock, and she was greeted by the sight of Warwick lying in a pool of blood, as well as Meg, who was still standing on the spot. She hugged Jessica tightly as tears of joy welled up in her eyes. Boss is dead. All of Meg's lackeys looked at Warwick, who was lying motionless in a pool of blood with a peach branch embedded in his chest. The burly man who had been kicked in the face by Mag earlier let loose a blood-curdling scream as he struggled to his feet. Run! He's dead. All of the other lackeys had similar expressions on their faces as they tried to get up and run, ignoring the pain coursing through their bodies. In their hearts, the invincible Warwick had been slain by someone, and he had been killed by a peachwood branch. Furthermore, he had been killed by an unbelievably fast peachwood branch. They didn't even see Warwick put up any resistance before he was killed without being able to retaliate. Just how terrifying was this guy to be able to kill a second-tier knight with a single sword strike? Their hearts had already collapsed. They only wanted to escape from this place and get as far away from this terrifying fellow as possible. Did I allow you to leave? Meg asked coldly as he looked at the lackeys who were about to escape. The lackeys' faces froze, and their legs that had just stepped forward stopped abruptly. Even Warwick wasn't able to retaliate against him, so how could they possibly dare to run away from him? Sir, please let us go. We were all forced to do this. We're all good people, and it was Warwick who did this to us. Yes, please let us go. We won't dare to do it again. We'll only be good people in the future. The lackey with a swollen face knelt down with a thud, kowtowing as he complained tearfully. Everyone else also fell to their knees, and began to sob about how they had been forced by Warwick to do things that went against their conscience. I can believe that you were forced to do this, but I'm not an idiot to say that you're all good people. Meg looked at the kneeling lackeys with a hint of mockery in his eyes. He wouldn't kill them because it was against the law, and it was different from a duel. It would be difficult to get away if they got entangled. However, he definitely wouldn't let them go just like that because what they had done was enough for them to die many times over. It was obviously a good choice to let the Grey Temple or the City Lord's castle deal with this matter. Master Brandley, something seems to have happened over there. Should we go and take a look? In an alley not far away from the residential area of the mine, a Grey Temple member made a report to Brandley, who was inspecting a massive charred crater. What happened? Brandley asked as he stood up. They had received a report in the morning that abnormal magic fluctuations had appeared in this area, and a house had been burned down. As such, he had brought some people here early in the morning. This was a bursting flame spell unleashed by a 5th-tier magic caster, but there were no casualties at the scene. It was just an abandoned house, and there weren't any other areas that had been damaged, so it wasn't a major threat. It seems to be a duel between two knights. It's not much of a big deal, but it's a little strange that a duel took place there. All of the people living there are family members of the deceased miners, the man hurriedly replied. Family members of the deceased miners. Brandley paused momentarily before nodding. Let's go take a look. Is Warwick dead? Expressions of incredulity appeared on the faces of the onlookers in the distance. A small old man picked up a rock from the ground before making his way over to them with a hunched back. His wrinkled face was dark red, and the black mineral powder seemed to have already fused into his skin. He looked at Warwick's corpse with hatred in his eyes. A series of people emerged from the black bungalows before making their way over to them. Most of them were elderly and married women, and there were even some children among them. Their faces were swollen from years of work, and their eyes were filled with hatred. They were holding rocks that they had picked up from the ground, and they were making their way over to them in silence. A hint of surprise appeared in Meg's eyes at the sight of all of these people, and he hesitated momentarily before returning to his bicycle. Father, you're amazing. But why are they holding stones in their hands? Amy asked curiously as she looked at the people surrounding them from both sides. Revenge. Meg gently covered Amy's ears and eyes with his hands, and he looked on with a grave expression at all of the elderly, women, and children who were making their way over to Warwick and his lackeys. Mother. Jessica also looked up at Rebecca with a perplexed expression. Don't look at me like that, Jessica. You're different from them. You're going to become the best seamstress in Chaos City, and you still have dreams. Rebecca held Jessica tightly in her arms and put her hands over her ears, closing her eyes as well. Thump. The stones smashed into their bodies, causing blood to spurt out, accompanied by shrill cries of agony. All of the rocks of different sizes were quickly stained with blood. Some of it belonged to dead people, while others belonged to living people. All of the expressionless faces seemed to have become a little more lively after being stained with blood. There was a hint of release, as well as a glimmer of hope in their eyes. Samani, my poor daughter. I've avenged you. I've avenged you. The hunchbacked old man was biting an ear in his mouth. He chewed it a few times and swallowed it directly. He was squeezed out of the crowd and directly knelt on the ground with a plop. He looked up to the sky and cried. His cries were contagious, and they quickly spread throughout the city. Roars of despair and cries of agony rang out as they vented their hatred and despair with rocks and blood. What are you doing? Disperse. Governor Woodrow is here. Do you want to be arrested? Chapter 397. The frenzied crowd was dispersed by the saber-wielding guards, but only a few mangled corpses remained. In particular, Warwick's body had been reduced to a pile of flesh and blood, and it was impossible to tell that he had once been a human. Blood had stained everyone's hands and clothes, as well as the rocks that they were still holding in their hands. They didn't go very far. Instead, they stood off to the side in silence again. They looked at the corpses on the ground, as well as the saber-wielding guards and the pot-bellied middle-aged man, Governor Woodrow. This. My Warwick. Woodrow stepped forward and looked at the pile of flesh and blood on the ground. Only his blood-stained clothes and the knight badge that had been stomped into the ground could be identified. His face instantly paled, and all of the fat on his body trembled. His outstretched hands stopped in midair, and he took a few deep breaths as a ferocious expression gradually appeared on his face. He glared at everyone present with a ferocious gaze as he spat through gritted teeth. Who did this? Who killed my Warwick? The blood-stained people were still looking at him in silence, but this time, they didn't back down or back down. In fact, they didn't even put down the rocks in their hands. Everything was very silent, and no sound could be heard. Meg looked at the obese Woodrow. It appeared that he was the one who was supporting Warwick. Warwick had been able to wreak havoc for so many years, and Woodrow was undoubtedly his biggest backer. As for how many benefits he had reaped from Warwick's crimes, that was unknown, but the number of people who had been oppressed and humiliated by him was no less than Warwick's. He wasn't the one who committed the crimes, but he was the true Demon King. It was me. Just as Mag was about to speak, the first old man stepped forward. He gritted his teeth as he glared at Woodrow, and said, I killed him, and I even bit off one of his ears. It's in my stomach right now. Do you want to cut open my stomach to take a look? Woodrow's lips trembled at the sight of the old man's bloodied face, and he pointed at him with an enraged expression as he roared, How could an old bastard like you kill Warwick? How dare you eat his ear? Capture him, cut off his ear, and send him to the Bawtai prison. I've worked in the mines for my entire life. My 2 sons died in the mines 3 years ago. Our entire family sacrificed everything for the crystal mines in Chaos City. That goddamn bastard raped my daughter-in-law, and even my 6-year-old granddaughter. My daughter-in-law hung herself with my granddaughter, but no one gave me any justice. I've lived for so long so that I can kill that bastard Warwick one day. I want nothing more than to eat his flesh, drink his blood, and chew on his bones. The old man stared at Woodrow with bloodshot eyes, pointed a broken finger at him, and roared at the top of his lungs, Inspector. You dog official, you will get your retribution. Catch him. Make him shut up. Woodrow was so angry that his entire body was trembling. Two guards stepped forward with their swords raised. I'll be waiting for you down there. Warwick is going to die, and you're going to die as well. I'll be waiting for you, dog official. The old man took a glance at Meg before committing suicide right in front of Woodrow. Woodrow looked at the old man's corpse, and he reflexively took a couple of steps backward. A chill ran down his spine, and the words that the old man had said before his death kept reverberating in his mind. Warwick was dead, so who was next? Woodrow was starting to panic. Who killed Warwick? If you guys dare to harbor the murderer, I'll throw all of you into the Bowtie prison and let you experience all kinds of torture. You won't be able to come out for the rest of your lives. Woodrow said coldly as he forced himself to calm down. He was surrounded by guards, and he looked at everyone. It was me. I smashed his finger off with a rock, and he took my little sister away. 3 days later, I found her in a river. I think I heard her say that she was very cold, but she couldn't speak anymore. I buried her, and then I wanted to kill him. A young man who was as thin as a bamboo pole took a step forward. He appeared to be no more than 11 or 12 years of age, but he possessed a level of calmness that belied his age. It was me. I gouged out his eyeballs, just like how he gouged out my mother's eyeballs. One person after another stepped forward and recounted their past events to Woodrow without any hint of fear. Looks like letting him die like that was too easy for him. Mag looked at the old man's corpse lying on the ground with his eyes wide open, and then at the people walking out one by one. He heaved an internal sigh, and a sense of fury began to rise from the bottom of his heart. He knew that even in Chaos City, there was darkness everywhere. Even in a modern society, there was no light everywhere, so how could this city, which was progressing on the path of law and equality, be completely immune to this? However, never would he have thought that this darkness would be such a vicious vortex. The same tragedy was being repeated over and over again. They lived in a city that was renowned for its equality, but their lives were not respected in the slightest. That human scum who had died at his hands, as well as this man who had become his bodyguard, deserved to die. Woodrow looked at the people around him. In the past, all of them had appeared to be scrawny black rats, but now, all of them had crazed looks in their eyes. People who didn't even fear death were the most terrifying things to behold. That's him, Governor. He's the one who sent Colin flying with a kick. He must have killed Master Warwick. No matter how many of these black rats there are, there's no way that they would be a match for Master Warwick. Otherwise, they wouldn't have waited until today to act. Right at this moment, a thin young man standing beside Woodrow pointed at Mag, who was standing at the back of the crowd. Woodrow turned to Meg with a hint of surprise on his face. This man clearly didn't belong here. Why would this place, which had always been as peaceful as a pool of stagnant water, suddenly erupt into such an uproar? There was a very good chance that this man was the culprit behind Warwick's death. He waved a hand through the air and commanded, "Arrest him." That guy challenged me, and I killed him. According to the laws of Chaos City, you have no right to arrest me. Meg stood on the spot, and looked at Woodrow with a calm expression as he said, "Besides, what you should be worrying about now is how you're going to make arrangements for your own funeral. After committing so many evil deeds, I'm sure you're going to die just as tragically as he did." Woodrow looked at Meg and burst into laughter. He was laughing so hard that tears were welling up in his eyes. In the end, he suddenly stood up straight, and the smile on his face completely faded. He pointed at the pile of mangled flesh on the ground, and gritted his teeth as he said, "I don't have a son. Warwick has been by my side ever since he was 5 years old. I raised him like a son, and he was going to inherit everything that I had. However, you killed him, and you didn't even leave me a complete corpse. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to chop you and that little girl into pieces and feed them to the dogs. I'm going to show you the pain of losing a child. As for these black rats, I'm going to throw them all into Bowtie Prison, and they'll never be able to come out again. In this place, I am the king, and no one can defy my will. Chapter 398. A deathly silence ensued. Everyone looked at Woodrow and the saber-wielding guards, and a hint of fear gradually appeared in their eyes. All of the rocks in their hands clattered to the ground as they turned to Meg. He had killed Warwick, and had avenged everyone. Would he be able to save everyone from being locked up in the Bowtie Prison? A hint of hope appeared in everyone's eyes, but it was more of despair than anything else. No matter how powerful he was, there was no way that he would be able to take on so many guards at once. He wouldn't even be able to protect himself, let alone save everyone. What do we do? What should we do now? Me and the others are in trouble because of us. Rebecca was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan as she looked at this scene. Father, is he a bad guy as well? He's wearing the City Lord's castle's uniform. Is he a bad guy as well? Amy was peeking at Woodrow through the gaps between Meg's fingers with a perplexed look on her face. That's right. He's a bad guy disguised as a good guy, but he's even worse than the average bad guy. Meg picked up Amy from the back seat and held her in his arms. He didn't think that he would encounter something like this in Chaos City. It appeared that there was still a long way to go before the Great Temple and the City Lord's castle were on equal footing. There was no lack of first-tier knights among these guards. Even though they were slightly weaker than Warwick, there were many of them, and they were subordinates of the City Lord, so their identities were quite special. Of course, in order to save his own life, Meg wasn't going to allow himself to be captured just because his opponent was wearing the City Lord's castle's uniform. However, if he wanted to get out of this situation easily, the easiest way to do so would be to have Amy step in. Even though Warwick was the only one who had heard what he had said, it wasn't a good idea to reveal too much of his power. Right at this moment, a grave voice sounded from nearby. There is no king in Chaos City, there are only rules and order. Have you forgotten who you are, Woodrow? Who is it? Woodrow's heart jolted slightly upon hearing this, and he turned to find that all of the guards had parted to create a path for him. Brandley wore a dark expression as he made his way over with a dozen or so members of the Grey Temple's city inspectors and city inspectors. Lord Brandley. A hint of panic flashed through Woodrow's eyes, but he quickly composed himself, and hurriedly stepped forward with a grief-stricken expression as he said, "So it's you, Master Brandley. What brings you here? An extremely vicious riot just took place here, and that thug brutally murdered my nephew as well as all of his subordinates. My nephew was like my own son to me, yet not even his corpse was found. I was overwhelmed by grief, and said something that I shouldn't have said. However, I have to avenge my nephew and all of his subordinates. I can't disappoint them. This guy and these rioters, we can't let any of them escape." The family members of the miners looked at Brandley with glowing eyes, but after hearing Woodrow's words, they gradually became enraged again. It seemed that this man was just as bad as Woodrow. Brandley's expression became extremely grim as he looked at the mangled corpses, as well as the one that had almost been dismembered. Who would have thought that such a heinous crime had taken place in broad daylight? What was even more surprising to him was that all of the blood-stained people around him were women, children, and elderly people. All of them were extremely thin, and there were blood-stained rocks beneath their feet. All of them were glaring at him with fury in their eyes, and it was as if they wanted to tear him to shreds. What could enrage these powerless people to the point that they were willing to dismember these corpses in broad daylight? The members of the Grey Temple were also quite surprised to see this. They didn't think that they would encounter something like this after coming here to investigate the fire. This was far more serious than a simple fire, and it involved so many people, so it was quite clear that this was no ordinary incident. "Master, a total of 6 people have been killed, and one of them is most likely a second-tier knight. This is a third-tier incident." A member of the Grey Temple quickly made his way over to the scene before reporting to Brandley. Brandley nodded in response, and just as he was about to take a look at what kind of heinous thug had committed this crime, Woodrow's expression suddenly changed. Blah, 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 are you here to catch bad guys? They're all bad guys, hurry up and catch them. Right at this moment, a mellow voice sounded. Brandley faltered slightly before turning around to find Meg and Amy surrounded by guards, and he exclaimed, Mr. Mac, Amy, what are you doing here? Do you know them, Master Brandley? A sense of foreboding welled up in Woodrow's heart, and he gulped as he asked in a cautious manner. Is Amy's father acquainted with this man? Rebecca's face was full of surprise. Her mood today could be described as 1,000 twists and turns. A hint of hope had also reappeared in the eyes of the families of the miners. Perhaps this man could change the course of events for the better. Unfortunately for you, we're most likely the ones he's referring to. Of course, I don't agree with this identity. If you want to condemn someone, you can always find a pretext. Meg shrugged as he looked at Brandley. Blah, 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 blah. Blah was a nickname that Amy had given to Brandley as his name sounded a little like that. Every time Meg heard this nickname, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. We're innocent. Amy also shrugged in a resigned manner. Brandley looked at the dismembered corpses on the ground, then at the neatly dressed Amy, who was completely unstained by blood. Even the soles of her shoes were clean, and there was no way that he could associate them with the culprits. Of course, what made Brandley even more convinced was Meg's character and identity. He was the owner of a restaurant that was filled to the brim every day, and he had a 4-year-old daughter who was already a third-tier magic caster. He was also a father who had taken 2 great magic casters as his disciples. He was a hero who had once helped to subdue the culprit behind a 4th-tier incident, and he was a man who dared to face a vicious werewolf with a cleaver in order to protect his customers. There was no way that he would kill someone on the street for no reason, especially in front of his own daughter. He's the owner of a restaurant in the Aiden Square. What's going on here, Woodrow? Brandley asked with a serious expression. Chapter 399. Brandley's sudden appearance had completely disrupted his plans, and what was even worse was that he was acquainted with Brandley. It was clearly not going to work, but Brandley had to die, regardless of whether it was to avenge Warwick or to cover up the fact that the Grey Temple was going to be able to track him down. Master Brandley, I don't know what kind of relationship you have with this murderer, but we have all the evidence and witnesses that he killed my men, so I have to arrest him and bring him back to the City Lord's castle for further investigation. This is a case involving our City Lord's castle, so I'm sure the Grey Temple won't interfere, right? Woodrow said in a domineering manner. Brandley's brows furrowed slightly at the sight of Woodrow. From his reaction, he could tell that there was definitely something fishy going on. However, Woodrow was using the City Lord's castle to pressure him, and that was putting him in a difficult position. Both the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle had the right to take care of matters like this, and they generally wouldn't interfere when it came to casualties. You're lying. Blah blah blah, he's a bad guy. Amy was a little enraged as she said, that bad guy was bullying Jessica and Mother, and he was going to kill Father, which was why Father intervened. He's also bullying a lot of people. Woodrow glared at Amy as he yelled, shut up. What right does a little brat like you have to spout nonsense here? Father, he's so fierce. Amy immediately shrank back into Meg's arms with a fearful expression. Don't be scared, I'm here. Meg stroked Amy's back in a comforting manner as he turned to Woodrow with a hint of mockery in his voice, and said, Is an innocent child not allowed to speak the truth while a fat bastard like you is allowed to spout nonsense? Do you think the entire world has to give in to you just because you're so shameless? The fat on your body was scraped off bit by bit from their bodies. Doesn't your conscience hurt? You! Woodrow pointed a finger at Meg as his fat body trembled with rage. No one had ever dared to insult him like this before. Branley turned to Meg with a hint of surprise on his face. Mr. Mack was normally very gentle and kind, but when he was insulting someone, he was like an upgraded version of Mr. Mack. He hesitated momentarily, but wasn't in a hurry to say anything. He still didn't know what was going on, and whether the Great Temple should intervene or not. However, no matter what Woodrow said, he definitely wasn't going to allow Mr. Mack and Amy to be hurt. The wrath of two great magic casters was not something that could be easily dealt with. He whispered something to one of his subordinates, and that person nodded before quickly departing. A bunch of rioters who can't even pick up a rock because you embezzled their pension money, a bunch of people who are over 60 years old, women, and children who aren't even 14 years old, a bunch of rioters who have lost their backbone in the mining accident, yet still have to suffer humiliation day after day. Women's chastity has become something that you can do whatever you want with them, and even little girls who are 5 or 6 years old can't escape from your clutches. They're lying on the ground trying to survive, yet they still have to be humiliated with the soles of your feet. That's the rioters you're talking about. Meg's smile became even colder as he turned to Woodrow and the guards of the governor's manor, and asked, shouldn't they be angry? Do they deserve to suffer all of this just because they're alive? Those miners who sacrificed their lives in the mines for the sake of the construction of Chaos City can never close their eyes. All of the guards slowly lowered their heads, and unconsciously lowered the sabers in their hands. They pointed them at the ground, and didn't dare to look directly into Meg's eyes. A burst of sobbing erupted from the crowd. The young boy who had calmly recounted how he had carried his little sister out of the river to bury her had his broken finger fall to the ground, and tears were flowing down his youthful face. An old woman was holding the head of a little girl who was missing a hand tightly in her arms, and sobbing in a muffled voice. It was like an old-fashioned ventilator, and only the sound of heavy breathing could be heard. A woman with 2 hideous scars on her face was staring blankly at Meg with tears streaming down her face. Amidst the silence, only the sound of suppressed sobbing could be heard. Wah! Branley felt as if his heart had been constricted upon seeing this. If what Meg had said was true, then what kind of torment and pain had these families of the miners who had sacrificed so much for Chaos City been enduring? The city lord's manor would pay compensation to the families of the miners every month to ensure that they didn't have to starve. However, from the looks of it, they didn't seem to be able to fill their stomachs at all, so where did the compensation go? There was no hatred for no reason, and there was no way that ordinary women and children would kill someone over something that someone had said. The muffled sobs and the guards of the governor's manor were all hanging their heads in shame. Branley slowly clenched his fists as a burst of fury burned in his heart. Nonsense. What nonsense? Come on, arrest him. Arrest all of these people. A panicked look appeared on Woodrow's face as he waved his hands through the air. All of the guards looked at one another with hesitation in their eyes. I'm the governor. I'm your superior. How dare you disobey my orders? Are you trying to rebel? Woodrow yelled as he kicked the guard beside him to the ground. All of the guards averted their eyes, but they still slowly raised their sabers and made their way toward Meg and the families of the miners in a hesitant manner. All of the people from the Great Temple had already formed their own speculations upon seeing this. They stood on either side of Meg and drew their long swords and wands. What are you feeling so guilty about, Governor? Meg's heart sank even further as he listened to the sounds of suppressed sobbing. He turned to Woodrow with a mocking smile, and said, "You don't have to use the city lord's manner to intimidate me. I've met the city lord before, and he's going to be hosting a conference between the dragon race and the demon race in my restaurant tonight. If you have any complaints, you can take your time to tell the city lord. I'm sure he'll be very interested in hearing about it. However, let's hear what they have to say now. Just what have you done during these past few years? Just what kind of unforgivable crimes did that scum of yours, whom you regard as your son and nephew, commit against them? Meg looked at the families of the miners, and said in a gentle yet firm voice, I know that it's very cruel for all of you to tell the truth, but I hope that you can tell the truth now. Master Brandley and the Grey Temple will uphold justice for all of you, and all of these scum will receive the judgment that they deserve. Kill him. Woodrow pointed at Meg as he roared. Chapter 400. Woodrow's face immediately paled at the sight of the badge in Brandley's hand, and he stumbled back a couple of steps with horror in his eyes. All of the guards also stopped in their tracks upon hearing this. They looked at Brandley and the badge in his hand with awe and veneration in their eyes. A 7th-tier magic caster was powerful enough to easily wipe out all of them here. What was even more frightening to them was the badge in his hand, as well as the fact that it was a 4th-tier incident. A 4th-tier incident was already considered to be one of the top incidents in the Grey Temple, and even the City Lord's castle wouldn't be able to intervene, let alone the City Magistrate's manor. They had already lost the right to participate, and all they could do was await trial. All of the family members of the miners turned to Brandley with expectant looks in their eyes. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at Brandley. It seemed that his efforts had not been in vain. Master Brandley, you can't do this. That's against the rules. You're violating the rules. Woodrow yelled in an indignant manner. If the Grey Temple were to classify this incident as a 4th-tier incident, then it would definitely be investigated thoroughly, and there would be no way for him to make a comeback. Woodrow, please don't interfere with the Grey Temple's investigation. The rules of the Grey Temple govern how incidents are handled. Now, all of the guards of the City Magistrate's manor can stand down. You may be involved in a 4th-tier incident, so your movements and areas of activity are restricted. Please stand still and cooperate with the investigation. Brandley looked at Woodrow with a serious expression as 2 of the Grey Temple's patrol guards stepped forward and stood on either side of Woodrow. I'm an official of the City Lord's castle. You have no right to restrict my freedom. I want to go to the City Lord's castle. I want to see the City Lord. Woodrow turned and tried to leave. Please cooperate with the investigation. Otherwise, we'll have to take disciplinary measures against you. The 2 patrol guards placed their hands on his shoulders with serious expressions. You're framing me. I don't accept this. I want to see the City Lord. I want to. Woodrow struggled, trying to break free from the hands of the 2 patrol guards. There's no need for you to go to the City Lord's castle. The City Lord has ordered that the Grey Temple will be given full authority to investigate this matter, and everyone in the City Magistrate's manor will cooperate with the investigation. The family members of the deceased miners must be treated with due respect. Right at this moment, the sound of galloping hooves sounded. Dacus rode in from outside the crowd and looked down at Woodrow as he said, Woodrow, the City Lord is very disappointed in you. When Woodrow heard this, he immediately sat on the ground as cold sweat flowed down his face. His lips trembled as he shook his head. It's not like that, Sir Dacus, it's not like that. Help me talk to the City Lord, I'm his most loyal dog, I'm only loyal to him. Woodrow's lips trembled as he shook his head. The City Lord's castles, Dacus cut him off as he dismounted from his horse. He looked at Brandley, and said, Master Brandley, I'm here on orders from the City Lord to assist the Grey Temple in this case. Thank you for your understanding, City Lord. Brandley nodded in response before turning to the family members of the miners as he said, the Grey Temple always handles cases in an impartial manner. Now, we're going to interrogate all of you, and everything you say will be used as evidence in a court of law, so you have to take responsibility for your words. We won't accuse any good people, and we won't let any bad people get away, either. Please trust us. The family members of the miners looked at Brandley with hesitant expressions. I am Ebenezer, and I'm 13 years old this year. My parents died in a mining accident 4 years ago, leaving me and my 2-year-old sister behind. The young man was the first to step forward. The entire scene was extremely silent, and the only sound that could be heard was the young man sobbing. Everyone's expressions began to become enraged, and they looked at the young man with pity in their eyes. However, when they looked at the people standing behind him, there was a hint of fear in their eyes. I feel like she's still looking at me, and she wants me to take her to catch butterflies. The young man looked up at a small butterfly fluttering above his head, and hesitated momentarily before extending a hand. The butterfly circled around him a few times and stopped on his fingertip for a while. Then, it flapped its wings and flew away. It flew towards the sky, and kept flying, and kept flying. Don't worry, child, your sister won't die in vain. Branley clenched his fists as he did his best to calm his voice. He nodded and said, "Next. My name is Harold, and I'm 65 years old. 4 years ago, my son." An elderly man made his way forward, and began to recount his story. One by one, the stories that made people sigh in anger came out of their mouths. It was like a heavy punch to everyone's heart, making it hard for them to breathe. "They're lying. There." Woodrow's face became paler and paler as he struggled to his feet. "Shut up!" Branley yelled coldly with a serious expression. "Take him and all the guards of the governor's manor back to Bowtie prison. Clean up the crime scene and settle the families of the miners properly. After that, summon them one by one, examine their criminal records, and give them justice." "Yes." Everyone from the Grey Temple replied in unison before tying Woodrow up with ropes. All of the guards from the governor's manor also had their weapons confiscated, and were huddled together with their heads bowed. "What a bastard!" Dicus also clenched his fists with rage. "He killed my nephew, and he's also killed many people. Didn't the Grey Temple say that you won't let any bad people go? Then arrest him as well." Woodrow was completely immobilized, and he roared at Meg. Branley looked at Woodrow with a serious expression, and said, "We still need to investigate whether Mr. Mag killed your nephew or not. However, if Mr. Mag really did kill such a vicious man, then he's a true hero. He deserves to be applauded and praised, just like how he sent you to prison. Mr. Mag, what are you doing here?" Dicus finally noticed Meg, and was surprised to see him here. "Master Dicus, I didn't think we'd meet again so soon." Meg was also a little surprised, and a resigned expression appeared on his face as he said, "I came here with Amy to invite her friends to a party, but they just so happened to encounter a bully who tried to take her for himself, and that's how this happened. The City Lord's castle is very sorry about this, and we would also like to thank Mr. Mag for protecting the safety of the commoners. We'll be sure to get to the bottom of this, and we won't let any of the bad guys get away." Dicus looked at Mag with a serious expression. "I certainly hope that's the case. The City Lord's castle should reflect on this. If the law is handed over to an individual, then his existence is meaningless." Meg also looked into Dicus' eyes with a serious expression. "I'll pass on your message to the City Lord." Dicus nodded. Chapter 401. Woodrow was taken away, along with all of the disarmed guards. Soon, more people from the Grey Temple arrived, and began to record the names of the families of the deceased miners. Not long after that, people from the City Lord's castle also arrived, but they didn't participate in the investigation. Instead, they delivered food and clothing to the families of the deceased miners. As they munched on their bread, a hint of life finally returned to their faces, and the pain that had been building up in their hearts for many years finally had a place to vent. "Mr. Mack, there are a few details about that duel that I have to ask you about. How did you kill that second-tier knight?" Of course, he was already disqualified as a knight last year. Brandley turned to Meg with a question. If it really was as everyone had said, then Meg had killed Warwick with a peach tree branch, then he was at least a third-tier knight. It was actually Amy who did it, I was only putting on an act. Meg looked at Amy, who was eating bread with Jessica, and smiled. At a time like this, he naturally had to shift the blame to Amy first. So that's how it is. Little Boss is really a little hero who gets rid of evil and brings peace to the good. An enlightened expression appeared on Brandley's face. If it really was Amy who did it, then everything made sense. Meg really didn't look like a third-tier knight. Brandley turned to Mag with a sincere expression and said, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you on behalf of the Grey Temple. Last time, you helped to subdue a serial killer, and this time, you've done a great service to Chaos City. You're welcome. Meg nodded with a grave expression as he looked at the people who were stuffing bread into their mouths, and said, I'm a little curious, just how many cases like this are taking place in Chaos City? This is a city of laws that promotes equality and freedom. If the laws have become a tool for some people, then won't the city become the cruelest prison? Brandley nodded with a serious expression, and said, the laws give everyone more freedom, and that's what the Grey Temple and the City Lord's Castle have always been doing. However, just as you said, this incident has also served as a wake-up call for us. Some people are using the laws to do things that go against the original intent of the city. I'll report this matter to the higher-ups, and I'm sure the Lord will make a wise decision. All right. I hope to see a more beautiful Chaos City. I'll be taking my leave now. Meg nodded before pushing his bicycle toward Amy and the others. Amy's, thank you so much for saving us today. Rebecca had just received a few loaves of bread from a worker at the City Lord's castle, and she was just about to kneel down when she saw Mag making his way over to her. Jessica is Amy's friends, Meg said with a smile. Amy, can with us, with you, with us with you? Of course, please come in. Rebecca hurriedly nodded before holding Jessica's hand and entering through the door. Meg took a glance at the workers who were disposing of the corpses nearby before entering Jessica's house with Amy's hand in his. The room was a little dim, and there was only one room. There was a bed in the room, and a very small window from which light shone in. There was a small wooden table beside the bed, on which there was some cloth, needles, and thread. There was also a shabby little bamboo chair next to the table, and a small stove in the corner. There was a pot of porridge in the pot, and a small bag of rice beside it. Aside from that, there was nothing else in the room. Amy's father, please sit here. Jessica dragged the bamboo chair over with some difficulty. She looked up at Mag with her clear black eyes, and there was a hint of gratitude in her eyes. All right, thank you. Meg nodded with a smile before sitting down on the only chair in the room. The bamboo chair, which had been repaired many times with broken wooden planks, creaked, and he couldn't help but sit up straight. It would be awkward if the chair collapsed. Please have some water. We don't have anything to serve you at home. I'm really sorry. Also, the dragon coin you left on the lunchbox last time saved my life. I really don't know how to thank you. Rebecca filled a chipped bowl with water and handed it to Meg as she looked at Meg gratefully. Although the bowl was chipped, it was very clean. The water rippled slightly, and it was clear and transparent. Meg picked up the bowl and took a big gulp before looking at Rebecca with a smile. You're too kind. Are you feeling better? Rebecca, who was about 30 years old, already had many fine wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She looked a little older than her actual age, and her face was a little sickly pale. However, compared to the people outside who were as hard as stone, her expression was much more lively. Especially her pair of black eyes, which were as clear and bright as Jessica's. Her face was also very gentle, and it could be seen that she was a delicate and pretty girl when she was young. Although she lived in a place like this, Jessica was still lively and cute. Meg had already found the reason: she had a good mother. After eating the chicken soup you made, I felt a lot better. After that, I went to the clinic to get some medicine, and I'm more or less better now. Rebecca nodded gratefully and extended her hand. There was a gold coin in it. She said in a somewhat uneasy manner, when they were fighting over it, I only found one gold coin. I'll return your dragon coin to you. I've already taken on some sewing jobs. Although the money isn't much, I can save a little every day. In 2 months, I'll be able to return all the money to you. Take this money. Just treat it as a gift from me to Jessica. You can buy some good food for the child to eat. Meg shook his head and pushed Rebecca's hand back. It seemed that she thought they were here to ask for money. No, I have to return this money to you. Rebecca didn't withdraw her hand. She looked at Meg with a determined gaze. Yes, Amy's father. My father said that if you borrow something from someone, you have to return it. So, we'll definitely return the money to you. I can also help my mother with things. Jessica nodded with a serious expression on her little face. Chapter 402. That's right, Jessica, I'm officially inviting you to today's children's gathering. Father is going to cook so much delicious food for us. Amy nodded with Ugly Duckling in her arms. She looked at Jessica with anticipation in her eyes, and said, Hurry up and open your present. I think you'll love it. You're going to a party. Jessica's eyes lit up as she looked at the dark-colored bag in her hands with curiosity and anticipation. She looked up at Rebecca, and asked, Mother, can I open it? Of course. Rebecca looked at her with an encouraging expression. Jessica held the bag with both hands as she made her way over to the bed. She then carefully untied the little bow that Amy had tied onto the bag. She tipped it over gently, and a little beige dress fell out. There was a colorful butterfly embroidered on the chest of the dress, and it spread its wings as if it were about to fly into the sky. Wow! What a beautiful dress! Jessica's mouth gaped open at the sight of the little dress on the bed. She was stunned for a while before turning around and hugging Amy tightly. Jessica, do you like it? Amy asked nervously. Yes, I love it. I have my own little dress now, and it's the most beautiful yellow one. Thank you, Amy. Jessica nodded as she hugged Amy tightly with tears welling up in her eyes. Rebecca turned her head away and wiped the corners of her eyes. She raised her head and blinked. Then. Can you let go of me first? Ugly Duckling looks like it's about to die. Amy said in a quiet voice. Meow, Ugly Duckling let loose a cry of despair. I'm sorry, Ugly Duckling. I forgot you were here. Jessica took a step back and stroked Ugly Duckling's head apologetically. It's all right, its head is very tough, Amy said nonchalantly. Meow, Ugly Duckling looked at Amy with a resentful expression. I'm the one who's about to die. Then I'll wear this dress to the gathering this afternoon. It's so beautiful, I've never received such a beautiful gift before. Jessica looked at Amy with elation. Sure. You can also wear that beautiful butterfly hair clip. You'll look really good. Amy nodded in agreement. Meg watched as the 2 young ladies discussed the clothes and the delicacies that they would be able to eat in a while. A smile appeared on his face as the gloominess in his heart dissipated. As expected, as long as he was with his young lady, his mood would slowly improve. After playing for a while, Meg saw that it was about time to go back and prepare for the party, so he took Amy and said goodbye. I really don't know how to thank you. Rebecca stood at the door and looked at Meg with gratitude. Then let's let Jessica play with Amy more. She also wants to find someone to play with on her days off. Meg said with a smile. He told Amy and Jessica to say goodbye, and then he slowly pushed his bicycle out of the alley. The work at the Grey Temple and the City Lord's castle was still going on, but most of the corpses and blood had already been cleaned up. There were a few puddles of blackish-red water that indicated that something had happened here, but no one knew if the old man who had been killed by the car would be given a proper burial. The people who were eating bread looked at Meg and Amy with gratitude in their eyes. Even though they didn't say anything, their gratitude was written all over their faces. Father, they all seem to be very grateful to you. Amy smiled as she exited the alleyway. Half of them are grateful to Amy. If it weren't for the fact that Amy wanted to invite Jessica, we wouldn't have come here, Meg said with a smile as he got onto his bicycle and rode toward the restaurant with Amy. The autumn breeze was still as pleasant as ever, and the autumn sun was still as warm as ever. Hopefully, it would be able to warm the hearts of those people as well. In the conference room of the City Lord's castle, the atmosphere was extremely cold. All of the City Lord's castle officials had different expressions on their faces. Some were angry, some were concerned, and some were fearful. Branley put down the piece of paper in his hand, and remained standing with reddened eyes. Michael sat at the head of the table with a cold and solemn expression on his face. From now on, Alva will be removed from his post and investigated. All of the information in the logistics department will be sealed, and a thorough investigation will be conducted into the embezzlement of the miners' compensation. Seal off the news, and ask the Grey Temple to assist in investigating all of the patrolmen's manners in Chaos City. Conduct a thorough investigation into those who use the law as a shield to oppress the citizens of Chaos City. Punish them severely. Raise the compensation standards for the families of the deceased miners and soldiers, and set up a department specifically to deal with this matter. Don't let the same thing happen again. Let me emphasize again, the laws of Chaos City are set up to ensure freedom and safety for everyone. If anyone dares to use them to oppress the citizens of Chaos City for personal gain, then I'll make them pay a price that's worse than death, regardless of who they are. Michael's hawk-like eyes swept over all of the officials present as he spoke in a cold voice. A tall and portly official sitting off to the side instantly paled, and he slid down from his chair onto the ground. No one dared to help him up. City Lord, I'll report this to the higher-ups right away. Branley said respectfully before quickly departing. If those who uphold the law sit at the same table as those who destroy it, then the ones who will suffer are those who are supposed to be protected. Novin told me that back when he refused to enter the City Lord's castle. I didn't quite understand what he meant back then, but I suddenly understand now. The most destructive forces come from within. Michael took a glance at Alva with a self-deprecating smile on his face. Father, can I invite Big Sister Cece and Big Bear one last time? Meg and Amy were about to reach home, and Amy was looking at the magic potion shop beside them. Of course, but I don't know if they'll have time to come. Meg stopped the bicycle with a smile. I'll go ask them. Amy climbed down from the car and greeted Charcoal and Green Pea. Then, she walked towards the magic potion shop with her short legs. Stupid fat cat, are you carsick again? Look at you lying on your back. You're so stupid, ha ha ha. Black Coal looked down at Ugly Duckling, who was lying on its back in the basket of the bicycle, and jeered. Meow. Ugly Duckling raised its head and let loose a cry at Black Coal. However, it had only just gotten up and extended its little paws when its body fell back uncontrollably. It was sprawled on all fours and looked up at the sky with a helpless expression, drawing another round of jeers from Black Coal. Even Meg couldn't help but burst into laughter. In the shop, Cece was holding 2 bottles of magic potion as she looked at Amy with an elated expression, and said, "Are you inviting me to a party?" "That's right, and Big Bear can come as well. Father will prepare a lot of delicious food." Amy nodded. She paused momentarily before extending a little finger and said, "They'll also have your favorite braised chicken." "Then I'm going." Cece's eyes lit up, and she immediately raised her hand. However, she quickly lowered her hand with a hesitant expression, and said, "But Master Julian went out this morning, and the shop has to be looked after." Chapter 403. What Amy said makes sense, but why does it sound a little sad? Cece looked at Amy. Normally, no customers would come to buy magic potions at this time of the day, especially on a day when the restaurant was closed. Aside from the regulars, the restaurant was usually quite deserted. "Then I'll take that as a yes, Big Sister Cece." "Will Big Bear come?" Amy asked with a smile. "If I come, he'll definitely come too. But it's a gathering of children, so won't he scare them?" "Although I think he's quite handsome," Cece said with a worried expression. "It's all right. He's ugly, but he's also a little dumb. That way, he won't scare them." Amy shook her head nonchalantly. "That makes sense." Cece's eyes lit up. However, a strange expression soon appeared on her face as she said, "But, little Amy, you're too honest." "Is that so?" "Father said that I have to be an honest kid. Only then will I be as pretty as Big Sister Cece," Amy said earnestly as she looked at Cece. I like how honest you are. You're so cute." Cece rubbed Amy's face with a happy smile. "Bye, Big Sister Cece. You have to bring Big Bear here at 11:30, Amy said happily as she turned and walked out of the restaurant. "All right, I'll be sure to come. For my braised chicken." Cece nodded solemnly. "Father, Big Sister Cece and Big Bear are back too. Shall we invite everyone?" Amy came out of the restaurant and looked at Meg with a happy expression. We've invited everyone. You're the best, Meg." "Let's go back and prepare to welcome the guests," Meg said with a smile as he stroked Amy's hair. "Dear Princess Amy, can I attend your gathering?" Charcoal poked his little head out and looked at Amy expectantly. "And me, will I be lucky enough to receive an invitation?" Green Bean also looked at Amy expectantly. Feeling a little embarrassed, she said, "I've never attended a gathering before." "If it's Green Bean, of course. I want to introduce you to my friends. They've never seen a talking bird before." Amy nodded with a smile. "What about me?" Charcoal asked. "Charcoal, you can't do it." Amy shook her head. "Why?" "I can speak too." Charcoal's voice suddenly elongated. Half of his body poked out from the gap between the railings of the birdcage and continued, "And I can even sing. I can sing many, many beautiful songs. It's super powerful. But you're ugly. What if you scare the children?" Amy shook her head and said worriedly, "Uncle Blue Fatty will be bringing his unborn little sister along. It's not good to scare little friend." Tattered Charcoal fell stiffly on the edge of the birdcage, rolling its eyes as it refused to accept reality. "Meow, meow," Ugly Duckling cried out happily in the basket with a smug look on its face. "All right, I'll let you come with us." Amy looked at Charcoal for a while before spreading open her hands in a resigned manner. She thought to herself for a moment before saying, "But I'm going to cover your cage with a black cloth. That way, you won't scare the children." "All right, I definitely won't run out." Charcoal immediately came back to life with full health. He immediately jumped up and was extremely happy. "Then let's go home first. Big Sister Mia and Big Sister Aisha are waiting for us." Meg smiled. Some of Charcoal's hair had grown back after being singed by Amy, but it was still ugly. "All right." Amy nodded before picking up Ugly Duckling in her arms. She made her way toward the restaurant as she yelled to Yabamia and Sally, Big Sister Mia, Big Sister Aisha, let's dance, spring is here again. Sally had changed into a cheongsam with golden fringes, which accentuated her long, snow-white legs, and gave her an air of elegance. Yaba Mia, on the other hand, was dressed in a black maid outfit, which accentuated her cute white stockings. Sure. I actually want to practice again. It's my first time dancing in front of others, and I'm so nervous. Yaba Mia nodded. I'm fine with anything. Sally nodded with a smile, appearing quite calm and collected. Meg pushed his bicycle past, and greeted the two of them before opening the door for everyone to enter. Boss, what's the new dish you're making today? Yaba Mia immediately asked after entering the restaurant. That's right, father. What's the delicious dessert you were talking about? Amy also asked. Sally was also looking at Meg. You'll know when it's ready. Go ahead and dance, I'm going to prepare the food for the party. There are a lot of guests today. Meg shook his head with a smile before making his way toward the kitchen. No matter what it is, as long as it's made by father, it'll definitely be super delicious. Amy said with full confidence. I think so too. Boss has never disappointed us before. Yaba Mia nodded in agreement. Then let's rehearse one last time before setting up the venue. We need an empty space for dancing, and we don't need so many tables and chairs, Sally said with a smile. All right. Amy nodded. She placed Ugly Duckling on a nearby chair before running behind the counter to get the music box. Yaba Mia and Sally began to set up the venue. They cleared out an empty space, and then put a few tables together to form a semicircle with the venue in the center. The music began, and Amy stood in the center while Sally and Yaba Mia stood on either side of her. They began the final rehearsal of Elysium Jodo. Meg was in the kitchen preparing the food for the party later. There were a total of 17 people invited for lunch, which wasn't a lot compared to the usual guests. Furthermore, most of them were children, so there wasn't a lot of ingredients to prepare. Amy. Are you home? Ignatzu and I are here. A tender voice sounded as a series of knocks sounded on the door. At the entrance of the restaurant, Daphne, who was wearing a light green floral dress, raised her small hand and knocked on the door. Beside her, the little fat demon with a small bean sprout on his head looked at his own reflection in the floor-to-ceiling glass with his mouth agape. He sucked in his stomach forcefully before releasing it and chuckling, causing the bean sprout on his head to jiggle with him. A tall and broad middle-aged man stood behind the two of them with a smile on his face. He looked up at the restaurant signboard with a hint of surprise on his face. Chapter 404. A hint of surprise appeared on Guy's face at the sight of Amy. He looked at Amy, then at Daphne, and came to a sudden realization as he said, "So you're that little half-elf girl that Daphne always talks about." "Amy, do you know my grandpa?" "Why do you call him Grandpa Tiger?" Daphne asked with a curious expression. "That's right, Daphne. Father and I met Grandpa Tiger when we went out to play. He was wearing a tiger robe, so I called him Grandpa Tiger. I didn't think that he would be your grandpa." "That's amazing." Amy nodded with excitement on her little face. "She's the little magic caster that Grandpa told you about before. She roasted a bronze wild boar to a crisp with a single fireball, and he even gave you the boar's tusk as a gift," Guy said with a smile. Never would he have thought that the little half-elf girl that Daphne was talking about would be that little prodigy magic caster. This was simply too much of a coincidence. "Wow, Amy, are you really that good? My grandpa said that the bronze wild boar was super ferocious. Its tusks were so long and sharp, yet you were able to roast it to death with a single fireball." Daphne looked at Amy with a shocked expression. "You're that ferocious?" Ignatzu's mouth also gaped open, and only after a long while did he swallow as he reflexively took a step back, as if he were trying to distance himself from Amy. Of course, I'm super ferocious, too. Amy nodded with an earnest expression before a vibrant smile appeared on her face. She spread open her arms and gave Daphne a hug as she said, "But that's only toward bad guys. I'm not ferocious toward good friends at all." "Did Amy hug me?" Daphne's body stiffened as a faint blush appeared on her little face. She nodded with a shy expression as she replied, "Yes. I know. Amy is super good, super adorable." "Daphne is also super cute," Amy said seriously as she looked at Daphne's face. Really?" Daphne clutched the hem of her little dress as her face flushed with excitement. She looked up at Guy and said, "Grandpa, give me my present." "All right." Guy smiled as he took out a long box and handed it to Daphne. "Amy, this is my present to you." Daphne's face as she handed over the long box to Amy with an expectant expression. "What's this? Can I open it and have a look?" Amy held the long box with curiosity written all over her face. "I want to know, too." Ignazio also came over and looked curiously at the long gray box in Amy's hand. Daphne of the world have a of course. Amy carefully untied the ribbon on the box before opening it, and a snowy white wand appeared before everyone's eyes. It would be a stretch to call it a wand as it could only be considered a simple handmade product made from the tusks of a bronze-skinned wild boar. The tusks were originally thick and long, but they had been polished into a thin and slender shape. However, the surface was a little rough, and there were 2 small notches at the bottom. There was a small purple ribbon tied around the bottom of the notch, and the words, "From Daphne to the cutest Amy," were written in black handwriting. Wow! What a great wand! And it's tied with my favorite purple ribbon. I love it. Thank you, Daphne. Amy's eyes lit up as she carefully removed the wand from the box before turning to Daphne with an elated expression. "Do you really like it, Amy?" An elated smile appeared on Daphne's face, and a faint blush appeared on her face. A faint smile also appeared on Guy's face. He had spent a lot of time with Daphne during this period of time, and this was the first time he had ever held a magic stone and a carving knife in his hands. He knew that it was a little ugly, but he was still quite happy to be acknowledged. "If this is a wand, then why do I feel like it's a little ugly?" Ignazio stroked his double chin as he murmured to himself. "Ignazio, do you have a death wish?" Daphne turned to Ignazio, and she looked as if she were a little lioness who was about to pounce on him. "I'm just expressing my opinion." Ignazio shrunk his head and quietly took 2 steps to the side. "If you truly love life, stay away from crazy women." "Of course not. I think it's super pretty, and I really like it." I didn't think that Daphne would remember that I wanted a wand. "It really is awesome." Amy shook her head as she slowly raised the crude wand in her right hand. A streak of fire and a streak of ice flames intertwined like a pair of small dragons, creating a vibrant red and a vibrant silver. The purple ribbons of the wand were swept up by the wind, and the crude wand instantly became extremely dazzling and eye-catching. It's so beautiful. Amy really is awesome." Daphne's eyes widened as she looked at Amy with reverence in her eyes. "I take back what I just said." Ignazio's mouth also gaped open upon seeing this. What a kind child. A smile appeared on Guy's face as he looked at Amy. "Thank you, Daphne. I really like this wand. It's my first wand, so I'll cherish it." Amy carefully placed the wand back into the box with a smile. "You're welcome. This wand was made from the fawn that you gave me. It really is quite interesting." Daphne chuckled. "I also have a present for you. Give me your hand." Ignaz's chubby little hand was clenched into a fist as he extended it toward Amy. What is it? Amy extended her little hand with a curious look on her face. Don't touch Amy's hand, Daphne warned in a quiet voice. Ignazu obediently raised his hand a little, and after Amy's hand was placed under his, he released his fist, upon which two objects fell into Amy's hand. They were a pair of flat and round seeds, one black and one white, and they resembled the black and white pieces of go. What are these, little bean sprout? Amy looked at the two seeds in her hand with a curious look on her face. Are they just two normal seeds? Daphne was also perplexed. Chapter 405. Amy's eyes lit up, and she solemnly placed the two seeds into the box that Daphne had given her. That's impressive. All right, I'll accept it then. Thank you, little bean sprout. You'd better not let it come into contact with mud and water. Otherwise, your house might explode, Ignazu reminded her. He then looked at Amy with a conflicted expression, and asked, also, why did you call me little bean sprout? I'm clearly older than you. Because you have a little bean sprout on your head. I think this little bean sprout is really cute, so I thought it would be best to call you that. Amy looked at the little green bean sprout on Ignazu's head with a smile. This is clearly a little sprout of the wisdom tree, not some little bean sprout. My father said that only the most talented tree demon would grow a tree of wisdom. This is the symbol of wisdom and talent. Ignazu said proudly. Then why are you always last in the exams? Amy asked, perplexed. Well. Ignazu felt as if he had been dealt a blow, and was speechless. He scratched his head, and said, actually, I don't want to compete with them. Otherwise, with my intelligence, I would have easily gotten first place. Daphne crossed her arms, and said with disdain, don't you feel ashamed saying something like that in front of the person who got first place? Ignazu blushed, and looked at Amy as he said, anyway, this is not a little bean sprout. It's the wisdom tree. If you must give me a nickname, then call me the wisdom tree. All right, little bean sprout. Amy nodded seriously. Wisdom tree. Wisdom little bean sprout. What the hell is that? It's still a little bean sprout. All right, I'll stick with little bean sprout. Ignazu had no choice but to accept reality. The little kids are already here. Parber, the big sister you've always been thinking about, is over there, and there seem to be two big sisters today. A horse-drawn carriage slowly stopped in front of the restaurant, and George lifted the curtains to look at the people standing at the entrance with a smile. Big sisters. Where is it? A little head popped out of the carriage. When she saw Amy and Daphne, she immediately opened her little arms and shouted happily, Big sis. He wanted a kiss. I want a hug. Raise it up high. You can't kiss me, hug me, or lift me up. Amy looked at Parber and rejected him coldly. Parber's happy expression immediately crumbled. He pouted and looked at Daphne pitifully. Not even Daphne. Before Parber could say anything, Amy had already rejected him on Daphne's behalf. She looked at Parber and said seriously, who isn't a baby? Baby. Baby, walk by yourself. Carry yourself. Parber sniffed and tried not to let his tears fall. Ha ha ha, what a cute little girl. Dear, is she the little boss you were talking about? She's really cute. A pregnant woman poked her head out of the carriage and looked at Amy with adoration in her eyes. She had no intention of standing up for her son at all. That's right, Miranda. She's the little boss. I'm sure you're carrying an adorable little princess in your stomach. George was still holding a little guy with a wooden pacifier in his arms. He nodded with a smile, and nudged Parmer, who was sitting beside him, as he said, Parmer, why aren't you greeting everyone? Parmer. Why are you here? Daphne was a little surprised as she stood on her tiptoes to look at the horse-drawn carriage. Wasn't he very angry that he lost to Amy in mathematics last time? Ignazio murmured. They forced me to come. I actually didn't want to come at all. I just wanted to study at home. Studying makes me happy. Parmer looked at the curious Daphne and Ignazio with an awkward expression. He didn't think that Amy would invite the two of them. But big brother. Father just said that there's a new dessert today. Didn't you get into the horse-drawn carriage yourself? Parmer looked up at Parmer with a perplexed expression. Pfft. Ha 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 ha. Ignazio burst into laughter, and the rolls of fat on his little tummy jiggled uncontrollably. Parmer's expression stiffened upon hearing this. He looked at the innocent Parmer, and said with a hint of anger, I'm not going to carry you today, you can walk by yourself. He then jumped off the horse-drawn carriage as he spoke. Little guy's ego really is getting stronger and stronger. He even knows that he can't embarrass himself in front of girls. Miranda looked at Parmer with a smile. Indeed. George nodded with a smile. He then gently patted Daphne's hand, and said in a gentle voice, sit down and don't move me, I'll come help you later. He then carried Parmer to the ground before handing Angus over to a servant beside him. Only then did he carefully help Miranda down the stairs. Wow, Uncle Blue Fatty, is this Auntie's baby sister? Amy looked at Miranda's bulging tummy with a curious expression. That's right. She already has 3 older brothers, so it must be a little sister this time. George nodded with a smile. Little girl, do you like little sisters more than little brothers? Miranda asked in a gentle voice as she looked at Amy. That's right. Little sisters are cuter and more fun to play with. I really like little sisters. Amy nodded with an elated expression. Then when I give birth to a little sister, I'll get her to play with you. I brought you a little present today. Miranda accepted a small golden bracelet from George before gently putting it on Amy's little hand. The golden bracelet was intricately crafted, and it was even more dazzling against Amy's snowy white skin. What a beautiful bracelet, it looks so good on Amy. Daphne praised before looking at the long gray box in Amy's hand with a conflicted expression. Her present seemed to be a little ugly, thank you, Auntie. I really like this bracelet, as well as the presents from Daphne and Little Beansprout. Amy waved the bracelet in her hand in an obedient manner before holding on to Daphne's little hand, and saying, please come in. Even though not all of the guests are here yet, you can all sit in the restaurant. Daphne's eyes immediately lit up again, and she looked at Amy with glowing eyes. Sure, it's my first time coming to a restaurant. Miranda nodded with a smile before holding on to George's hand as they made their way into the restaurant. Darling, you said there were only 2 types of delicacies in the restaurant, is that really true? Mr. Mack said that he's going to release a new dish today, so there might be more. George's expression stiffened slightly as he suddenly realized that he seemed to have forgotten something very important. Chapter 406. Father, Daphne, Little Beansprout, and Auntie gave me a beautiful present, Amy said to Meg as soon as she entered the kitchen. Did Amy thank them properly? Meg made his way to the kitchen with a smile. Of course I did. Amy nodded vigorously. Hey, it's you, Uncle. Meg's gaze fell on Guy, and he was also rather surprised. He then turned to Daphne and smiled as he said, what a strange fate. I didn't think we'd be so lucky either. Guy nodded with a smile. Welcome, everyone, and a few other guests. Please take a seat first, Mag said to everyone with a smile. Please take a seat, Yabamiya said with a smile as he pointed at the crescent-shaped tables and chairs. What a beautiful restaurant. This must be the most beautiful restaurant in the entire Aiden Square, right? Miranda sat down with George's help, and her eyes lit up as she looked around the restaurant. Yes, Mr. Mac's restaurant is the most beautiful, and it's usually very lively. You have to wait in line to eat here. George nodded with a smile as he gently rocked Angus in his arms. The little guy looked around with his big brown eyes before settling his gaze on the beautiful chandelier above. He stared intently at it, and a smile appeared on his little face. Palmer and Parber sat down on either side of the two of them. Palmer chose a seat in the furthest corner, and looked out the window with a cold expression as if he were contemplating something. Daphne and Guy also sat down, and both of them stared at Ugly Duckling with wide eyes. This orange kitten was so adorable that they wanted to hug it. "Do you want to play with Ugly Duckling?" Amy asked the two of them after putting away the presents. "Yes." Parber was the first to raise his hand. "Yes." Daphne and Ignatzu also nodded. Amy walked over to the reluctant Ugly Duckling, and placed it on the ground with a smile as she said, "Then go ahead and play with it." "Amy, you're the best," Daphne exclaimed happily. She squatted down and stroked Ugly Duckling's head with a radiant smile. "Kitty, you're so cute. I want to hug you." Parber was still a little wobbly as he walked. He squatted down and reached out his short arms to hug Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling rolled its eyes at Parber, and took 2 nimble steps back to avoid his hug. "Don't run. I don't want you to hug me." "I want to hug you," Parber said anxiously. He took a few more steps forward and reached out his little hand again. Ugly Duckling took a few steps back and hid behind Amy. "Ugly Duckling rejected your hug and rolled its eyes at you," Amy said with a shrug. "All right, even so, I'll still like you," Parber said sincerely. "Little girls are so adorable. I hope our next one is also a little girl." Miranda rested her chin on her hands as she looked at Amy and Daphne with envy on her face. "Yes, it'll definitely be a daughter this time," George said as he looked at Miranda with a gentle expression. "Amy, we're here." Someone knocked on the door, and Cece's voice sounded at the same time. "It's Big Sister Cece and Big Bear." Amy's eyes lit up, and she ran over to open the door. "Thank you, adorable little Amy, for inviting us to your party." Cece was wearing a white dress, and she was holding a flower wreath. She placed it on Amy's head with a smile. The white, yellow, and pink flowers were in full bloom, and they appeared even more beautiful in the light of the green leaves. "Thank you, Big Sister Cece and Big Bear." "Welcome," Amy said happily. She reached out to touch the flower wreath, and her smile became even more vibrant. Lulu was standing behind them with a bashful smile on her face. There were 2 bird cages in her hands, and Greenpeace spread its wings elegantly in the cage on the left. It bowed toward Amy, and said in a crisp voice, "Thank you, Amy." "Thank you, Your Highness Amy, but can I really only stay in this pitch-black cage for this party? This is torture for me both mentally and physically." The cage on the right was covered with a piece of black cloth. Charcoal's voice came from the cage with a hint of sincerity. "That won't do. There are a lot of little kids coming today. Charcoal, be good and stay in the cage. If you lift the black cloth or come out on your own, I'll freeze you and send you home." Amy shook her head without any intention of negotiating. "All right, I definitely won't come out on my own," Black Coal grumbled before falling silent. "Wow, Amy, is this your family's restaurant? It's so beautiful." Right at this moment, an astonished voice sounded from behind Lulu. Lulu stood to the side, revealing Jessica and Rebecca, who had just arrived. Jessica had changed into the yellow dress that Amy had given her, and a yellow butterfly hair clip was clipped to her ears. Her bright black eyes were filled with surprise as she stared at the bright floor-to-ceiling glass. One of her little hands was clasped behind her back, and no one knew what she was hiding. Rebecca was standing beside Jessica. She was wearing a grayish-green floral dress, and there were many creases on the dress, as if it had just been found in a box. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and she appeared to be quite gentle. She stood beside Jessica with a smile on her face. "That's right, this is my family's restaurant. Jessica, you look so beautiful in this dress." Amy's eyes lit up at the sight of Jessica, and she quickly stepped forward to grab Jessica's hand with a smile as she said, "You're as beautiful as a butterfly." "That's right, what an adorable little girl." "Jessica, what a beautiful name." Cece was also looking at Jessica with a smile on her face, and she reached out to stroke her hair. "Thank you." Jessica was a little shy. She then looked at Amy with a serious expression and said, "Amy, give me your hand. I have a present for you." "All right." Amy extended her left hand as she looked at Jessica with anticipation in her eyes. Jessica placed her little hand on Amy's hand in a solemn manner before slowly removing her hand. A purple crystal that was about the size of a little finger appeared on Amy's hand. The surface of the crystal was a little irregular, but it was clean and clear without any impurities. When the sun shone on it, it reflected a dazzling purple light, and projected a beautiful purple ribbon onto Amy's hand. "Wow, what a beautiful purple gemstone." Amy's eyes lit up. She loved purple things, but she quickly placed the purple crystal back into Jessica's hand. She shook her head as she said, "No, Jessica, I can't accept such a precious gift." Chapter 407. Amy looked at Jessica's clear eyes, then looked at the purple crystal in her hand. She slowly clenched her fist, nodded her head, and said with a smile, "I'll keep it well, just like our friendship. I'll always keep it." "Okay." A joyful smile appeared on Jessica's face, and she also nodded with a similar expression. "Scott, Jessica received a precious friendship with that purple stone you gave her. Did you see it?" Rebecca looked at the two young girls holding hands with a smile, and turned away to wipe the tears from her eyes. "I'm not late, am I?" A gentle voice sounded, and Luna made her way over with a smile on her face. "You're not late, Teacher Luna. Everyone's here, so the party can begin now," Amy said to Luna with an elated expression. "Teacher Luna, you're here too." Jessica also looked at Luna with an elated expression. "Yeah, Amy and Jessica are both so beautiful today." Luna looked at the two of them with a smile, and two bright red flowers appeared in her hand as if she were performing magic. She then pinned them onto Amy and Jessica's hair, and said, "I didn't prepare any presents, so I'll give each of you a little red flower. Teacher Luna, I'm Jessica's mother. Thank you for taking care of Jessica and me." Rebecca stepped forward and bowed to Luna with gratitude in her eyes. "You're too kind. Jessica is very adorable and obedient. I heard that you've been in poor health recently. Are you feeling better now?" Luna asked with concern as she helped Jessica to her feet. "It's all thanks to Mr. Meg's help that I'm almost fully recovered. I can continue to work, and Jessica doesn't have to go to the streets anymore." Rebecca nodded in response. "Mr. Meg is such a kind person." Luna smiled. She didn't know when Meg had helped Jessica's mother, but it was great news that Jessica didn't have to beg on the streets every day. She was such a beautiful and adorable little girl. "Teacher Luna." Everyone walked in, and Daphne and Ignatsu greeted Luna with elation in their eyes. "Hello, Teacher Luna." Parber looked at Luna with a hint of surprise, and an awkward expression appeared on his face, but he still mustered up his courage and greeted her. "Hello, Daphne, Ignatsu, Parber. So you're all here. Amy has invited all her good friends." Luna greeted the parents before taking a seat with Cece and Lulu and the others. "Look, this is a talking bird. The two bird cages were placed on a table by the side, and Amy waved to the children. A bird, 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 bird. Is that for real? My neighbor's parrot can talk too, but it can only imitate my neighbor's words. It can't communicate with people. Ignatsu was the first to come forward, and asked curiously. I've never seen a talking bird before. And this bird is so beautiful. Its feathers seem to be glowing. Daphne looked at Green Bean with anticipation in her eyes. Little bird. Little bird. Parber clapped his little hands with elation. He grabbed onto a chair and tried to climb onto it. Unfortunately, his limbs were too short, so he couldn't find a way to climb onto it. How can a bird talk? That's a lie, Parmer said disdainfully as he glanced at them. This is Green Bean and this is Black Coal. Black Coal is too ashamed to face anyone, so it's hiding, but you can hear its voice. Amy didn't explain anything after hearing Parmer's words. Instead, she introduced Green Bean and Black Coal to everyone. I'm not hiding because I'm too ashamed to face anyone. Also, my name is not Charcoal. You can call me the Honorable Fama Odin Ben. Charcoal's voice came from the birdcage wrapped in black cloth, with a hint of annoyance. I'm Sunny. They usually call me Green Bean, but I prefer the name Sunny. Green Bean spread open its wings and spoke in an elegant voice. Wow, it's really good at talking. And it's talking to us. It didn't just learn a few words. Ignatsu yelled with elation. What a beautiful voice. I also want to raise a cute talking bird. Daphne turned around to look at Guy. This is the first time I've seen a talking bird. If I see one in the future, I'll definitely catch it for you. Guy was a little exasperated. The chances of encountering a talking bird were very, very slim. Bird. Hug. Parber opened his little hands and tried to grab the bird cage on the table, but the table was so much taller than him that he couldn't reach it even if he stood on his tiptoes. It really is a talking bird. It's so cute. It's even cuter than our Dai. Miranda's eyes lit up, and she patted Parmer's head with a smile as she said, Parmer, you can't deny things you haven't seen in the future. Otherwise, you'll only make yourself seem shallow. That's not a quality that a man should have. You have to be humble and courteous in order to become a real man. I understand, Mother. Parmer looked at Miranda and lowered his head with a hint of guilt in his eyes. However, he quickly raised his head again and looked into Miranda's eyes with a serious expression as he said, I'm going to become a real man and become a role model for my little brothers. I also believe in you. Miranda nodded with a smile and an encouraging look in her eyes. George merely looked on with a smile, and the little guy in his arms reached out toward the chandelier. Even though he didn't catch anything, a joyful smile still appeared on his face. Meg made his way out of the kitchen with a smile, and said, Come here, everyone. It's an honor to have invited all of you to a party, and I hope you'll all have a great time today. Even though this is a party, we're in a restaurant, so we'll order whatever you like. Aside from the tofu pudding, there's no limit on anything you want to eat today. After everyone had taken their seats, Meg continued, and Yabamiya placed a menu in front of everyone. Miranda flipped open the menu, and took a quick glance at it before asking, Wow, there are so many dishes. Are these all new dishes that were released today? Probably. Perhaps. Perhaps. George replied with an awkward look on his face. He didn't think that Meg would be so straightforward as to give the guests a free menu. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.